2 millennia ago in ancient Greece, a blind poet named Homer, along with the era's renowned authors, playwrights, and historians, chronicled the stories we now refer to as Greek mythology. These narratives spoke of the land's legendary heroes, the formidable gods of Olympus, and the unfortunate mortals who crossed their paths. But who was Zeus, and why did he rebel against his father and unleash a cataclysmic flood to destroy humanity? How did Prometheus create mankind, and why did the calamities of the world emerge from Pandora's box? What awaited the souls in Hades' realm, and how were mythical creatures like the Hydra, Cyclops, and Medusa vanquished by heroic figures? From the 12 Labors of Heracles to the Trojan War, this is the complete story of Greek mythology. In the beginning, there existed only chaos, a vast emptiness. From this chaos emerged Gaia, the earth, and Eros, love. They were soon joined by night and day, who ended Erebus's reign with their eternal cycle of dusk and dawn. Lastly, Tartarus, the deepest abyss of the world, where condemned souls would be punished, came into being. These were not the only primordial beings, as Gaia also gave birth to Uranus, the sky. Gaia and Uranus united to produce 12 children, 6 sons and 6 daughters, known as the Titans. Among them was Oceanus, a great river encircling the world, and his brother Hyperion, the sun, who rode his chariot across the sky, bringing light to the earth. At night, his daughter Selene, the moon, illuminated the darkness. However, Uranus was a cruel father, imprisoning his children deep within the earth. The Titans sought their mother Gaia's help to escape. She crafted an unbreakable sickle and gave it to her youngest and strongest son, Cronus. Cronus waited patiently, and when Uranus next came to lie with Gaia, Cronus ambushed him, cutting off his genitals, which fell into the sea, giving birth to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, marking the beginning of a new generation. With his father defeated, Cronus took over as ruler of the world. However, his reign was short-lived. Cronus and his sister Rhea had 6 children, known as the gods. Fearful of a prophecy that foretold his downfall by one of his children, Cronus swallowed each newborn whole. But the youngest, Zeus, was saved by Rhea, who hid him on Mount Ida in Crete, and tricked Cronus by giving him a rock wrapped in infant's clothes. Raised by his grandmother Gaia, Zeus stayed hidden until he matured and became strong enough to challenge Cronus. Upon returning, Zeus struck down Cronus and freed his siblings from Cronus's stomach. United with his brothers and sisters, Zeus waged a 10-year war against the Titans, enlisting the 100-handed giants and the Cyclops, who forged Zeus a powerful thunderbolt, Poseidon a trident, and Hades a helmet of invisibility, turning the tide of the battle. After their victory, Zeus imprisoned the Titans in Tartarus, condemning them to eternal torment. A special punishment was reserved for Atlas, who was forced to hold the sky on his shoulders forever. However, a few Titans, such as Themis, the Titan of law and order, and her son Prometheus, who had sided with Zeus, were spared and allowed to live among the gods. With the Titans defeated, the 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, divided the realms. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld, where the dead resided. Residing on Mount Olympus, Zeus and his fellow gods became known as the Olympians, ruling over mortals and monsters alike. Despite the gods' dominion over Earth, Prometheus, one of the Titans spared, was unsatisfied with its inhabitants, seeing only mindless beasts. He crafted humans from clay, sculpting them in the god's image. Dissatisfied with their primitive existence, he gifted them fire, a primordial flame enabling them to emerge from caves, rise above other creatures. Humans soon dominated the earth, but Zeus demanded gratitude through animal sacrifices at every meal, leaving it to Prometheus to decide which part of the animal would be offered. However, Prometheus's loyalty lay with humanity rather than the gods. Seeking to benefit mankind, he slaughtered a bull and divided it into 2 portions, presenting both to Zeus. One portion contained the tender, succulent meat hidden beneath the beast's unattractive stomach. The other portion comprised the bare bones, concealed by a thick layer of appetizing fat. Zeus, choosing the parcel covered in fat for the gods, was infuriated when he discovered only bones beneath the top layer. In his wrath, he decided to punish mankind by confiscating the fire Prometheus had given them. Deprived of fire, humans reverted to darkness, retreating into caves. Determined to save his creation, Prometheus scaled Mount Olympus to steal the divine fire. With a great torch in hand, he returned to Earth, bestowing fire upon humanity once more, reigniting the dawn of civilization. Observing fire on Earth again, Zeus was livid. He captured Prometheus, chaining him to a mountain. Daily, an eagle feasted on Prometheus's liver. As an immortal, Prometheus's liver regenerated every night, only to be devoured again the next day. This endless torment persisted for millennia. Zeus, still vengeful, sought further retribution against humanity. He commanded Hephaestus to create a being capable of bringing great suffering upon man. Hephaestus, moulding clay from the earth, shaped the first woman. From Aphrodite, she received emotions and beauty, and from Zeus, an insatiable curiosity. Hermes bestowed upon her the gift of speech and named her Pandora, meaning all gifts, for she had received gifts from each god. The gods also gave her a sealed box, said to contain special gifts, but forbade her from opening it. Zeus instructed Hermes to deliver Pandora to Earth, where she soon married the Titan Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Although Prometheus had warned Epimetheus against accepting gifts from the gods, he was so captivated by Pandora's beauty that he accepted her without hesitation. For a time, Epimetheus and Pandora lived happily, exploring nature and raising their daughter, Hera, who brought them great joy. However, Pandora's curiosity increasingly fixated on the forbidden box. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, her curiosity grew into an overwhelming desire. Finally, she succumbed and peeked inside the box. Instantly, a dark cloud filled the air, releasing all the evils Prometheus had kept from humanity. Greed, envy, old age, and disease into the world. By the time Pandora managed to close the lid, only hope remained inside. This was Zeus's greatest punishment, for with hope, humans would endure life's adversities, ensuring they survived the hardships now plaguing them. Thus ended the golden age of man, a perfect era where humanity lived without care or worry, never aged, and thrived on nature's bounty. But, with old age escaping from Pandora's box, their time on Earth came to an end. The age of silver followed, then the age of bronze, where humans became arrogant, neglected to worship the gods, and crafted weapons for warfare. Their viciousness and cruelty incited Zeus's anger. Appalled by their lust for war, he decided humanity deserved total annihilation. He chose to unleash a great flood upon the world, and instructed his brother Poseidon to summon his strength and strike his trident into the ocean's deepest depths. The resulting wave was so immense that it eclipsed the tallest mountains, crashing down upon human cities below. Torrential rains poured from the heavens, and fierce winds lashed the waters until they engulfed all visible land. Survivors soon perished from starvation, and eventually Zeus's son. Forewarned by Prometheus of the impending flood, they had built a ship to withstand the cataclysm. Their small vessel weathered Poseidon's storm, drifting alone in the vast oceans as they mourned their lost kin. Eventually, they drifted toward Mount Parnassus, the sole peak untouched by the floodwaters. Believing his task complete, Zeus commanded the rains to cease and the waters to recede, restoring calm to the earth. However, the world was now devoid of human life. Deucalion and Pyrrha prayed to the gods for guidance on repopulating humanity, and the Titan Themis answered their plea. She instructed them to walk along the mountain, casting stones behind their backs. As they did so day after day, the stones thrown by Deucalion transformed into men, and those thrown by Pyrrha into women. Thus, humanity was reborn. With the sins of their ancestors washed away, they were granted a fresh start, free to forge their own path. Only time would reveal if they would repeat the brutality and destruction of their predecessors. Yet this time, humanity had a safeguard, for on Mount Parnassus, Deucalion discovered a gift, a secure tool impervious to even the gods of Olympus, ensuring humanity's protection for all eternity. Nord's ultimate security package. Zeus, the ruler of the gods, governed from his majestic throne on Mount Olympus. His symbols, the thunderbolt and the eagle, were regarded as omens by humanity. Zeus controlled all weather patterns, from violent thunderstorms to fierce blizzards, reflecting his mood. The Greeks revered Zeus as the greatest of the gods, bestowing good fortune on those who honoured him and terrible punishments on those who defied him. Having taken control of the world, Zeus sought a wife to rule alongside him. However, the king of the gods was notorious for his infidelity, having no fewer than 7 wives throughout his reign. His first marriage was to the nymph Metis, the goddess of wisdom, who soon became pregnant with his child. But Zeus had been forewarned by his grandparents, Gaia and Uranus, that Metis was destined to bear him a son who would one day overthrow him. To prevent this prophecy from coming true, Zeus swallowed Metis before she could give birth. However, after consuming Metis, Zeus began to experience a severe headache. The pain grew so intense that he asked for his head to be split open with an axe. From the cleft in his forehead sprang Metis' child, a daughter named Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, fully grown and ready to join the Olympians. Zeus's second wife was his aunt Themis, the titan of justice and law, who had betrayed her kind to side with the gods during their war with the Titans. Together they had 3 daughters, who came to wield great power over the mortal world. Known as the 3 Fates, these sisters became the goddesses of destiny, spinning the thread of life that determined the path of every soul. The younger sister, Clotho, known as the Spinner, was responsible for spinning the thread of each human life as they were born. She controlled if and when a soul was created, and only through her great power could a new life come into existence. Her older sister, Lachesis, the Allotter, determined the fate of each person. Using her rod, Lachesis measured the length and nature of every thread spun upon Clotho's spindle, thereby plotting out the duration and major events of each human life. Finally, the eldest and most feared sister, Atropos, the Unturning, ended lives by cutting through the thread when a mortal's allotted time on earth had come to an end. Zeus went on to marry many more times, fathering numerous gods and goddesses. His 7th and final wife was his older sister Hera, the goddess of women and marriage, who ultimately became his queen. Despite their marriage, Zeus's lustful tendencies extended beyond the heavens, and he continued to pursue other women. Fathering countless children, Zeus was related to nearly every god and hero, often disguising himself to win the affections of women who caught his eye. One such woman was Europa, the princess of the city of Tyre and sister to the famous hero Cadmus. While Europa was picking flowers by the coast one day, she captured Zeus's attention. To hide his infidelity from Hera, Zeus transformed himself into a magnificent white bull and descended to earth. Europa, mesmerized by the bull's beauty, climbed onto its back. As soon as she did, Zeus set off at full speed, charging into the sea. Europa, terrified, clung desperately to the bull's horns as it ran across the ocean. To calm her, Zeus revealed his true identity, telling her he was not merely a beast, but the king of the gods. They eventually arrived at Crete, the island where Zeus had been hidden as a child, and there she bore him many children. Their offspring would become some of the most renowned men in Greece, including Minos, the king of Crete, and owner of the legendary Minotaur. In honour of his love for Europa, Zeus named the continent where they landed Europe, and recreated the image of the white bull in the stars, which became known as the constellation Taurus. Hera, wife of Zeus and queen of the gods, was the protector of marriage and women, and was deeply respected in Greek society. Despite her reverence, Hera was also known for her vengeful and spiteful nature, making her a poor match for Zeus, whose numerous affairs constantly incited her wrath. Although she was his queen, Hera bore Zeus only 2 of the 12 Olympians, Ares and Hephaestus, with the other gods resulting from Zeus's many affairs. One of Zeus's most insulting acts of infidelity was with the princess Io, one of Hera's most devoted priestesses. When Hera came to investigate, Zeus, in an attempt to protect Io, transformed her into a beautiful white cow. However, Hera was not deceived, and realizing she had caught Zeus red-handed, demanded that he give her the white cow as a present. Knowing that refusing would only confirm her suspicions, Zeus reluctantly agreed. Hera then locked Io in a cave, where she was guarded by the 100-eyed monster known as Argus. Argus was the perfect guardsman, able to rest half his eyes, while the other half remained vigilant, ensuring that he never broke his watch. Zeus, too frightened of Hera to act directly, eventually dispatched the messenger god Hermes to rescue the tormented Io. A masterful musician, Hermes chose to conquer Argus, not with force, but with cunning. Befriending the 100-eyed monster, he played his pipes and sang soothing lullabies until Argus gradually succumbed to sleep. Once Argus's 100th eye finally closed, Hermes drew his sword and killed the beast, freeing Io from her imprisonment. In honour of Argus's service, Hera took his eyes and placed them on the tail of her favourite bird, the peacock, symbolising her power. Not yet satisfied, Hera sent a gadfly to torment Io, nearly driving her mad as she fled. Io wandered extensively, with the sea along her path named the Ionian Sea in her honour. The Bosporus, meaning ford of the cow, was also named to commemorate her passage. Eventually, Io arrived at the Nile in Egypt, far from Hera's reach, where Zeus restored her human form. They had a child, Epiphus, and Io became the ancestor of many of Greece's greatest heroes, including Perseus and Heracles. Another lover of Zeus, Leto, faced the full extent of Hera's jealous wrath. Upon discovering that Leto was pregnant with twins by Zeus, Hera sent the great serpent Python to torment her. Leto fled across Greece, desperately seeking a place to give birth. Hera, forbidding any city from offering her refuge, left Leto wandering from Athens to Crete, from Lemnos to Samos, with no one daring to help her for fear of Hera's reprisal. Only the island of Delos offered Leto sanctuary, yet she still could not deliver her children. Hera had imprisoned Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, on Mount Olympus, preventing any births. after 9 agonizing days and nights, the other goddesses took pity on Leto, fetching Eileithyia from Olympus and finally allowing her to give birth. Leto named her children Apollo and Artemis, the god of archery and the goddess of the hunt, who would become prominent Olympian deities. Upon the twins' birth, celebrations erupted across the known world, with Thebes hosting the grandest festivities. However, Queen Niobe of Thebes, whose beauty was rivaled only by her arrogance, refused to participate. Boasting of her own 7 sons and 7 daughters, Niobe mocked Leto for having only 2 children, claiming she deserved the honours instead. Furious at such insolence, Leto sent Apollo and Artemis to Thebes to exact revenge. From the heavens, Apollo shot down Niobe's sons, while Artemis killed her daughters, leaving Niobe in utter despair. Distraught, Niobe fled to her homeland of Sipylus, begging the gods to end her suffering. Taking pity, Zeus transformed her into a stone, ceasing her anguish. Known as the Weeping Rock in western Turkey, Niobe's tears can still be seen flowing whenever it rains, as the water courses through the porous rock. Apollo, the younger twin, was the god of archery, light, and music, closely associated with prophecy. He journeyed to Mount Parnassus, where Python, the serpent that had tormented his mother, resided. Taking his revenge, Apollo slew the beast with a volley of arrows and built a grand temple on the site, which became the oracle of Delphi's home. Known as the Pythia, the oracle became one of ancient Greece's most influential figures, offering guidance to everyone from kings to commoners. Acting as Apollo's mouthpiece, she would inhale vapours from her chamber, entering a frenzied state and delivering prophecies through her ecstatic and cryptic utterances. Proud of his victory over Python, whom he vanquished with over 1,000 arrows, Apollo declared himself the greatest archer. When he saw Eros, the young god of love, with his bow and arrows, Apollo mocked him, declaring the child unfit to wield such a weapon. Incensed, Eros vowed to show Apollo the true power of his bow. Following Apollo to the river Peneus, Eros spotted Daphne, the river's beautiful daughter, sitting by the shore. He shot Apollo with a gold-tipped arrow, inciting an overwhelming love for Daphne, while a lead-tipped arrow made her detest Apollo. As Apollo approached Daphne, consumed by desire, she fled in terror. Driven by Eros' spell, Apollo pursued her through the forest. Using his divine powers, he quickly closed the gap. Desperate, Daphne cried out to her father, the river god Peneus, for help. Answering her plea, Peneus transformed her, making her limbs heavy and her skin turn to bark until she became the first laurel tree. Mourning his lost love, Apollo made the laurel's leaves evergreen, ensuring they retained their colour year-round. Ever after, Apollo carried a laurel wreath, keeping Daphne's memory close to his heart. Asclepius, Apollo's most notable offspring, was an exceptionally skilled physician, famed for his ability to resurrect the dead. This extraordinary talent incited the wrath of Hades, who saw these revivals as a disruption of the natural balance, depriving the underworld of new souls. To re-establish order, Zeus struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt. However, at Apollo's fervent plea, Zeus later revived Asclepius, who then became the god of healing and medicine. Asclepius fathered Hygeia, the goddess of cleanliness, from whom we derive the term hygiene. Artemis, the twin sister of Apollo and goddess of the hunt, was a formidable archer, vigilantly overseeing hunters and ensuring the preservation of nature. As a moon goddess and one of the 3 virgin goddesses alongside Athena and Hestia, Artemis fiercely guarded her chastity. When Actaeon, a hunter and grandson of Cadmus, accidentally stumbled upon her while she bathed in the forest, Artemis exacted swift retribution. Transforming Actaeon into a deer, she unleashed his 50 hunting dogs upon him, leading to his agonizing death. Poseidon, the brother of Zeus, ruled the seas from his splendid underwater palace. Known as the Earthshaker, he was responsible for all earthquakes, traversing the oceans in his golden chariot and manipulating the waters with his iconic trident. One of his most severe punishments was directed at Minos, the king of Crete. When Minos refused to sacrifice his finest bull to Poseidon, the god cursed Minos' wife to fall in love with the beast, resulting in the birth of the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature. Though typically content with his dominion over the seas, Poseidon grew weary of Zeus's rule on Olympus. He conspired with Athena, Hera, and Apollo to overthrow Zeus, but their rebellion was unsuccessful. As punishment, Zeus sent Poseidon and Apollo to serve King Laomedon of Troy, where they spent a year building the city's formidable walls, which would later face the might of Greece's armies during the Trojan War. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, and daughter of Zeus and Métis, was revered for her love of strategists and clever heroes, assisting many in their quests. Proud and assertive, Athena sought to claim patronage over a great city in eastern Greece, yet to be named. Competing with her uncle Poseidon, they each endeavoured to present the city with the finest gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, producing a stream of salty water which failed to impress the city's inhabitants. In contrast, Athena placed her hand upon the earth, bringing forth the first olive tree. This tree provided not only sustenance, but also numerous other benefits, including oil for cooking, medicine, perfume, candles, and athletics. Acknowledging the olive tree's value, the gods declared Athena the victor, and the city was named Athens in her honour, becoming a significant centre of culture and power in ancient Greece. Athena, the inventor of mathematics, also cherished music, creating the trumpet and flute, and acting as the patron of artists and craftsmen. Proud of her weaving skills, she found herself in conflict with a talented Libyan girl named Arachne. Arachne boasted she was the best weaver, challenging Athena to a contest. They each crafted a tapestry depicting the gods, with the superior piece earning victory. To Athena's dismay, Arachne's tapestry surpassed her own. Enraged, Athena struck Arachne repeatedly until she fell. Instead of killing her, Athena transformed the girl into the first spider, where she continued weaving intricate webs. The creatures known as arachnids bear Arachne's name to this day. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was born from the severed genitals of Uranus, making her the eldest of the Olympians. A mischievous deity, she often used her powers for amusement, compelling Zeus to sleep with mortal women, inciting Hera's anger. As the embodiment of sexual attraction among mortals and gods, she was frequently accompanied by Eros, or Cupid, to the Romans, whose arrows could enchant any being, sparking love in unsuspecting hearts worldwide. One particularly striking young man, Narcissus, found himself the target of many of Eros' arrows. Blessed with remarkable beauty, Narcissus was also cursed with vanity and arrogance, delighting in cruelly rejecting the women who pursued him. His path crossed with that of the nymph Echo, who, cursed by Hera due to Zeus' interest in her, could only repeat the words of others. Echo had long harboured feelings for Narcissus, but when she finally gathered the courage to approach him, she could only mimic his words. Unimpressed, Narcissus cruelly spurned her, crushing her spirit. Overwhelmed with sorrow, Echo wasted away until nothing remained of her but her voice, which still echoes back our words today. However, Echo's plight did Narcissus. The term narcissist originates from this tragic tale. While some, like Narcissus, became ensnared by love, others embarked on endless quests to find it. Pygmalion, a talented artist from Cyprus, was one such man. After years of unsuccessful romances, he gave up on women, dedicating himself entirely to his art. Immersed in his work, Pygmalion began sculpting a new statue, labouring day after day until the form of a woman emerged. Pouring his heart into his creation, he meticulously carved each detail, from her delicate face to every strand of hair, until his masterpiece was complete. Stepping back to admire his work, Pygmalion was awestruck by the beauty of his creation. He had never seen a more perfect woman, real or sculpted. Spending hours holding the statue's hands and kissing its cold lips, Pygmalion grew increasingly despondent, realizing he would never find a woman he loved more than his stone creation. Night after night, he prayed to the gods, begging for a woman as perfect as his statue. As he prayed, the statue behind him began to change. Its cold hair turned into flowing locks, and its grey skin softened to a warm touch. Startled, Pygmalion looked up to see the statue come to life. Aphrodite had answered his prayers, transforming the statue into a living woman named Galatea. She stepped down from her pedestal and embraced Pygmalion, ending his years of loneliness and isolation. Aphrodite, while delighted in uniting lovers, was also a vain and jealous goddess, quick to avenge those who overshadowed her. Such was the fate of Psyche, a Greek princess whose beauty was said to surpass even Aphrodite's. Men from all over the world came to admire Psyche, neglecting Aphrodite's altars and letting her temples fall into ruin. Infuriated, Aphrodite enlisted Eros, her companion, to make Psyche fall in love with the most vile man on earth. However, upon seeing Psyche's beauty, Eros himself fell deeply in love and refused to carry out Aphrodite's orders. Without Eros's intervention, Psyche grew increasingly lonely and turned to the Oracle of Delphi for guidance. The oracle directed Psyche to a magnificent palace where her destined husband would claim her. Upon arrival, the palace's servants warned Psyche that her husband was a secretive man who would visit only in the dark of night, forbidding her to seek his identity. Psyche enjoyed her new life, but her curiosity eventually got the better of her. One night, she lit an oil lamp to see her husband's face and discovered that he was Eros, the god of love. In her excitement, Psyche accidentally spilled hot oil on Eros, waking him. Disappointed by her lack of trust, Eros declared their marriage over and flew back to Mount Olympus. Heartbroken, Psyche sought out Aphrodite, begging for a chance to reunite with Eros. Aphrodite, still harbouring resentment, gave Psyche an impossible task. To see Eros again, Psyche had to obtain a fragment of Persephone's beauty from the underworld. Psyche journeyed to the underworld and, after paying Charon's fee, crossed the river Styx. She approached Persephone, who kindly placed a fragment of her beauty in a golden box. As Psyche made her way back, curiosity overtook her once more. She opened the box to glimpse the beauty inside, but the sight was too much for mortal eyes, and she fell into a deep, endless sleep. In that crucial moment, Eros, moved by Psyche's unwavering devotion, descended to earth and used one of his enchanted arrows to rescue her from the clutches of eternal slumber. Upon their return to Olympus, Zeus orchestrated a magnificent wedding celebration, bestowing upon Psyche the gift of immortality. Thus, Psyche, whose name translates to soul, ascended to divinity. In a union with Eros, love and soul were eternally intertwined, and their daughter, Hedon, the goddess of pleasure, brought joy to mortals across the world. Hephaestus, the god of smithing and the son of Zeus and Hera, had a challenging beginning. Born with a lameness, his mother Hera, repulsed by his deformity, cast him from Olympus into the sea, intending for him to drown. Miraculously, Hephaestus survived the fall and later returned to the realm of the gods, seeking vengeance. He crafted a golden throne for Hera that trapped her upon sitting. Only through Zeus's intervention was Hera released, and in return, Zeus granted Hephaestus the hand of Aphrodite, the most beautiful of the Olympians, in marriage. Hephaestus became a master inventor, creating many of the palaces on Olympus and the divine tools of the gods. Among his renowned creations were Athena's breastplate, Hermes' winged helmet and sandals, and Helios's chariot. His most famous works included Eros's bow and arrow, and the splendid armour and shield of Achilles, which aided the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. Known to the Romans as Vulcan, the god of fire, Hephaestus was said to forge his creations in a workshop beneath Sicily's Mount Etna, with the volcano's smoke and lava emanating from his great forge. Ares, the god of war, revelled in the chaos of battle and delighted in the destruction of men and cities. Detested by both mortals and gods for his embodiment of unrestrained rage, cruelty, and bloodshed, Ares often became the target of the gods' tricks. He maintained a long-term affair with Aphrodite, Hephaestus' wife, sneaking into her bed whenever her husband was away. Upon discovering the affair, Hephaestus was enraged and forged an invisible net to trap the lovers. When Ares and Aphrodite were caught, all the gods of Olympus were summoned to witness their humiliation, with laughter echoing throughout the heavens, until Poseidon took pity on them and set them free. Aphrodite was not Ares' only lover. He also had an affair with Eos, the goddess of the dawn. Eos rose each morning to clear the path for her brother Helios, the sun. When Aphrodite discovered their affair, she cursed Eos with an insatiable desire for young mortal men. One morning, Eos's gaze fell upon the city of Troy, where she saw the handsome Trojan prince Tithonus. Unable to resist, she descended to earth and introduced herself to the prince, and they quickly fell in love. Each morning, after completing her duties, Eos visited Tithonus in Troy. As her love for him deepened, she feared losing him to the perils of mortal life. Desperate, Eos begged Zeus to grant Tithonus immortality, which he did. However, Eos overlooked asking for eternal youth for Tithonus. Initially, they lived happily, but as time passed and Tithonus aged, he realized his grim fate. A century later, burdened by age, his body failing and his mind deteriorating, Tithonus longed for death, which would never come. Eos, heartbroken, confined him to a grand chamber for safety. Eventually, she transformed him into the first cicada, an insect known for its long life and morning song, symbolizing Eos's eternal duties. Hermes, the messenger god and patron of thieves, was famed as a trickster among the gods, often playing pranks on his fellow deities. Upon reaching adulthood, he took on the role of messenger, carrying a golden rod as a symbol of his authority. His winged helmet and sandals enabled him to fly, delivering messages across Olympus and the underworld. In the underworld, he assisted Hades, guiding souls to the afterlife. Hermes fathered many children with various women, but his son Pan, the god of nature and fertility, stood out. Born with the features of a satyr, part man, part goat, Pan's mother, the nymph Dryope, was horrified and fled in terror at his sight. Hermes, however, brought Pan to Olympus, where the gods were intrigued by his by Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, who named him Pan, meaning all, for he was adored by all the gods. Much like his father, Pan was known for his numerous romantic entanglements with nymphs, the nature deities inhabiting streams and forests worldwide. One nymph, Syrinx, captured Pan's heart, prompting him to pursue her through the marshes she called home. Terrified of the god, Syrinx desperately sought to escape, transforming herself into a bed of water reeds upon reaching the river's edge. When Pan finally arrived at the river, he tore through the marshes in a frantic search for the nymph. As he did, a strong breeze blew through the reeds, producing a hauntingly beautiful melody unlike anything he had ever heard. Inspired by this sound, Pan uprooted the reeds and bound them together with wax, creating a set of pipes. He named the instrument the panpipes in memory of his lost love, Syrinx, and carried it with him wherever he went, playing tunes to honour her. Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, had an extraordinary birth. His mother, Semele, had asked Zeus to reveal himself in his true form, an act that caused her to die from sheer terror. Zeus, rescuing the unborn infant from her womb, placed it in his thigh until the baby was fully developed, leading to Dionysus's birth a few months later. Revered as a symbol of pleasure and liberation, Dionysus was one of the most beloved gods in Greece. His followers engaged in wild festivities involving mass drinking, frenzied dancing, and passionate lovemaking. As the creator of wine, Dionysus offered a means for his followers to escape their sorrows while bringing them joy and euphoria. Although Dionysus was known for his indulgent lifestyle, he was also a generous deity, often granting mortals their deepest desires. After saving a dear friend of Dionysus, King Midas was offered a wish in gratitude. Consumed by his desire for wealth, Midas wished for the power to turn anything he touched into gold. Dionysus granted this wish, and Midas returned to his palace, ecstatic and eager to test his new ability. He turned everything he touched to gold, floors, walls, and even his clothes. Proudly, he flaunted his newfound wealth to guests from across the kingdom. However, when Midas attempted to drink water or eat food, both transformed into gold upon contact. Realizing the curse of his gift, he despaired. As Midas wept in frustration, his daughter came to console him, but her touch turned her into a golden statue. Devastated by the loss of his child, Midas begged Dionysus to revoke the gift. Taking pity on him, Dionysus instructed Midas to bathe in the river Pactolus, washing away his golden touch. Thus, the story of King Midas became a timeless warning against prioritizing wealth above all else. Demeter, one of the 12 Olympians and sister to Zeus, was the goddess of agriculture, ensuring bountiful harvests and fertile land. Under her care, the earth thrived in perpetual spring. Above all, Demeter cherished her daughter, Persephone. However, Hades, the god of the underworld, also desired Persephone. One day, as she wandered through a meadow, a beautiful narcissus flower bloomed before her. When Persephone reached out to pluck it, the earth opened up, and Hades dragged her down to the underworld, forcing her into marriage. Distraught over her daughter's disappearance, Demeter searched for 9 days and nights until the sun god Helios revealed Persephone's captor. In her grief, Demeter secluded herself for an entire year, refusing to return until her daughter was freed. Without Demeter's blessings, the world plunged into a severe famine, with fields becoming barren. Faced with humanity's imminent starvation, Zeus intervened, ordering Hades to release Persephone. Hades agreed, but fed her a pomegranate seed, binding her to the underworld for eternity. To save humanity, Zeus struck a compromise. Persephone would spend 9 months each year with Demeter, bringing spring and summer, and 3 months in the underworld, resulting in winter as Demeter mourned her absence. Thus, the seasons were born. Among the gods of ancient Greece, few were as feared as Hades. Brother to Zeus and Poseidon, Hades ruled the underworld, the realm of the dead. Although he governed this dark kingdom with his wife Persephone, Hades did not control death itself. That power belonged to Thanatos, who claimed mortal souls. Hermes, the messenger god, guided these souls to the shores of the underworld. Waiting there was Charon, the eternal ferryman, who transported the deceased across the deadly river Styx for a fee. Those unable to pay wandered the riverbanks for 100 years before being allowed to cross. Upon crossing the river Styx, souls passed the White Rock and arrived at the formidable adamantine gates of the underworld, guarded by Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. Cerberus devoured any intruders or escapees. Once through the gates, souls were brought to the court of the underworld, where 3 judges determined their fate by examining their earthly actions. Those who had not angered the gods found peace, while sinners faced eternal torment. Souls were then directed to one of 3 destinations: the fields of Asphodel, the blissful Elysium, or the fiery depth of Tartarus, reserved for the worst transgressors. The fields of Asphodel served as a serene haven for those who had neither achieved greatness nor committed notable sins during their lives. Here, the majority of souls found their final resting place. After 1,000 years, their time in the fields of Asphodel would conclude as each soul drank from the river Lethe. The river's waters erased their memories, and these souls, now cleansed of their past lives, were reincarnated to begin the eternal cycle anew. The second path led to Elysium, a paradise of everlasting joy reserved for heroes, demigods, and mortals favoured by the gods. Those in Elysium experienced life's pleasures in abundance, with feasts, parties, and hunts filling their days. Souls in Elysium had the option to return to Earth, but most chose to remain in blissful peace, avoiding life's hardships. Across the shore from Elysium lay the Isle of the Blessed, an exclusive sanctuary for the greatest heroes like Helen of Troy, Achilles, and Odysseus, who resided there for eternity. The third and final path descended into Tartarus, the deepest, darkest part of the underworld, reserved for the worst criminals and those who had offended the gods. Here, Cronus and the other titans were imprisoned, witnessing new souls arriving in the realm of the damned. Hades himself took charge of Tartarus, designing and overseeing each soul's punishment according to their crimes. Among these punishments were the Deities, 49 sisters who had murdered their husbands. They were condemned to fill a leaking tub with water, an endless task symbolising their unending guilt. Ixion, the first man to commit familial murder and who lusted after Zeus's wife, was bound to a fiery wheel, eternally spinning. Tantalus, who had killed his son and stolen from Zeus, was cursed with a perpetual hunger and thirst. Standing in a pool of water with branches of fruit hanging above him, each attempt to drink or eat was thwarted as the water receded and the branches lifted out of reach, leaving him in constant agony. The most infamous punishment was that of Sisyphus, who had cheated death multiple times. For his deceit, Sisyphus was condemned to roll a boulder up a steep hill, only for it to slip from his grasp near the summit, forcing him to start over endlessly. Despite his dominion over the underworld, Hades needed assistance to manage his vast realm. The Furies, 3 relentless sisters, carried out his punishments. They did not limit their vengeance to the dead. even the living could not escape their wrath for heinous crimes like familial murder. These tormented souls were hunted by the Furies, who pursued them until they were driven insane. The Furies returned to the underworld to rest between their bouts of relentless torment. Within the underworld also lay the fields of mourning, a sombre place for souls who had pursued love only to face rejection. These anguished spirits wandered a dark and haunting forest, eternally mourning their unrequited love. In a distant corner of the underworld existed the land of dreams, accessible only to the gods. Here, Morpheus, the god of dreams, ruled alongside his brothers. Each night, they influenced the dreams of mortals and gods alike, offering visions of the future or haunting nightmares. Morpheus's control over the unconscious mind was so profound that the drug morphine was named after him, renowned for inducing sleep. The true seat of power in the underworld, however, belonged to Hades, who resided in a grand palace deep within the earth. Hidden away on an island engulfed by fire, those who sought his home without an invitation would become lost in the dark, labyrinthine halls of the dead. Despite the underworld's many punishments, Hades and Persephone were not merciless rulers and would show compassion to mortals who entered their kingdom. Orpheus, a famed musician and poet, deeply mourned his bride Eurydice, who had died from a snakebite on their wedding day. Desperate to reunite with her, Orpheus journeyed to the underworld. At the river Styx, he played a beautiful song on his lyre, moving Charon to ferry him across for free. Upon reaching the other side, his music lulled Cerberus, the three-headed dog, into a deep sleep. Finally, Orpheus played a heartfelt melody for Hades and Persephone, recounting his love for Eurydice. Touched by his sorrow, Hades agreed to release Eurydice on the condition that Orpheus not look back at her until they were both out of the underworld. Overjoyed, Orpheus led his bride through the dark, winding halls of the dead. However, as he neared the surface and daylight touched his face, excitement overcame him, and he turned to look at Eurydice. Tragically, they had not yet left the underworld, and she was instantly pulled back into its depths, never to return. This story served as a cautionary tale to all Greeks about the virtues of patience and restraint. If Orpheus had resisted temptation when his goal was so close, Eurydice would have been restored to him. With the gods having secured their dominion over the world and the realm of the dead, the heroic age began, marked by warriors embarking on legendary adventures. The first of these heroes was Cadmus. Searching for his sister Europa, who had been abducted by Zeus, Cadmus sought guidance from the oracle of Delphi. She informed him that his sister was lost forever and urged him not to dwell on her absence. Instead, the oracle revealed that the gods had special plans for him. He was to follow a sacred cow and establish a city where it rested. Cadmus found the cow nearby and followed it for days into the region of Boeotia. When the cow finally lay down to rest, Cadmus founded the city of Thebes on that very spot. Thebes would grow to become one of the greatest cities of ancient Greece, rivaling Athens and Sparta in power and influence. To sanctify the city and receive divine blessings, Cadmus planned to sacrifice the sacred cow to Athena, a ceremony requiring water from a nearby spring. However, when his companions went to collect the water, they encountered a ferocious dragon guarding the spring. The beast attacked them mercilessly, killing them as they attempted to flee. Hearing their screams, Cadmus rushed to the spring, only to find the dragon devouring his friends. With a determined thrust of his spear, he impaled the dragon, which let out a final, terrible scream before dying. Unbeknownst to Cadmus, the dragon was sacred to Ares, the He condemned him to serve as his slave for 8 years to atone for the offence. Ares' troubles extended beyond Earth, reaching Mount Olympus, where Hephaestus, the god of smithing, uncovered one of Ares' deepest secrets. Hephaestus was married to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, but she had been unfaithful, having an affair with Ares. This affair had lasted many years, and Aphrodite had secretly borne Ares a child named Harmonia. When Harmonia came of age and Cadmus completed his years of servitude, Ares, impressed by Cadmus's dedication, offered Harmonia to him as a bride. A grand wedding celebration took place in Thebes, attended by all the gods of Olympus except one. Hephaestus, having just discovered his wife's infidelity, presented Harmonia with a cursed wedding gift, a beautiful necklace destined to bring misfortune to its possessors. Unaware of the necklace's curse, Cadmus and Harmonia ruled Thebes for many years, enjoying a long life and having 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. Yet, the curse of Harmonia's necklace eventually brought ruin to their house. Their youngest daughter, Semele, was the first to suffer tragedy. After a night with Zeus, Semele became pregnant with Dionysus, but the cursed necklace brought misfortune when she burst into flames upon seeing Zeus's true form. Her sister Ino also faced a grim fate. Her husband, Athena, went mad and killed their children, and Ino leapt to her death trying to escape him. Agave, another daughter, gave birth to Pentheus, who became the second king of Thebes after Cadmus retired. However, Pentheus banned the worship of Dionysus, his divine cousin, who retaliated by driving the women of Thebes into a frenzy, leading them to tear Pentheus apart, with his own mother, Agave, ripping off his head under Dionysus's spell. The last daughter, Autonoe, was the mother of the hunter Actaeon. Actaeon was transformed into a deer and devoured by his own dogs after accidentally seeing the goddess Artemis bathing. The necklace of Harmonia, passed from generation to generation, continued to curse the house of Cadmus, with each new descendant suffering misfortune. The curse particularly tormented Oedipus, the 7th king of Thebes, whose tragic story brought tears to all who heard it. Oedipus, the son of King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes, faced hardship from birth. His father, Laius, the city's 6th king, consulted the oracle of Delphi about his lineage's future. The prophecy revealed that Laius would die at his son's hands. To prevent this, Laius bound his newborn son's feet and left him hanging from a tree to die. A shepherd found the helpless child, rescued him, and named him Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, due to his injured ankles. The shepherd delivered Oedipus to the childless king and queen of Corinth, who raised him as their own. Oedipus enjoyed a happy upbringing in Corinth, but as he reached manhood, he questioned his true parentage. He consulted the oracle of Delphi, who warned him to avoid his homeland, as he was destined to kill his father and marry his mother. Believing the prophecy referred to his foster parents, the king and queen of Corinth, Oedipus vowed never to return. Instead, he journeyed to Thebes, unaware it was his true birthplace. On the road to Thebes, Oedipus encountered a chariot blocking his path. The impatient passenger struck Oedipus on the head with a stick as he sped past. Enraged, Oedipus pursued the chariot and killed its occupants, including the elderly man who had struck him. Unbeknownst to Oedipus, he had fulfilled part of the prophecy, killing his true father, King Laius. Upon arriving at Thebes, Oedipus discovered the city plagued by the Sphinx, a monster sent by Hera to punish Thebes for its king's sins. The Sphinx, with the head of a woman, body of a lion, and wings of a bird, posed a riddle to anyone wishing to enter or leave the city. city, what animal has 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Those who failed to answer were killed and eaten. Desperate to rid themselves of the creature, Thebes' rulers offered the throne to anyone who could defeat it. Oedipus approached the Sphinx, who eagerly awaited another victim. After pondering the riddle, Oedipus answered, "Man. As a child, man crawls on all 4s. As an adult, he walks on 2 legs, and in old age, he uses a walking stick, a 3rd leg." Defeated, the Sphinx leapt to her death, and Oedipus entered Thebes as a hero. Crowned king for saving the city, he was given the recently widowed Queen Jocasta as his wife, unaware she was his mother, thus fulfilling the prophecy. For a time, Oedipus and Jocasta lived happily, but the gods soon cast a plague upon Thebes as punishment for the crimes of patricide and incest, of which Oedipus was still unaware. As the plague worsened, the shepherd who had saved Oedipus revealed his true identity. Horrified to learn she had married her son, Jocasta hanged herself. Grief-stricken by her death, Oedipus took her golden brooches and blinded himself with their pins. Disgusted by his actions, the people of Thebes exiled Oedipus, who wandered as a beggar, with only his daughter Antigone by his side. Blind and destitute, he endured abuse from those he encountered, but found solace in Antigone's companionship. Oedipus died an old man, understanding that no mortal could escape their fate. His story inspired Sigmund Freud's Oedipus complex, proposing that every young boy desires his mother and resents his father, mirroring Oedipus's tragic tale. With the gods firmly in control of the world and the realm of the dead, the heroic age dawned, marked by legendary adventures. The first hero of this era was Cadmus. Searching for his sister Europa, abducted by Zeus, Cadmus sought the oracle of Delphi's guidance. The oracle revealed that Europa was lost forever and advised Cadmus not to dwell on her absence. Instead, the gods had special plans for him. He was to follow a sacred cow and found a city where it rested. Cadmus found the cow and followed it for days into Boeotia, where it finally lay down. On that spot, Cadmus founded Thebes, which grew to rival Athens and Sparta in power and influence. Though the house of Cadmus was the first to produce a lineage of great heroes, another family of legendary figures soon emerged. In the kingdom of Argos, which lay between the prominent cities of Athens and Sparta, King Acrisius ruled. However, Acrisius had received a grim prophecy from the oracle of Delphi, foretelling that his grandson would one day kill him. Before long, Zeus, captivated by the beauty of the king's daughter Danae, transformed himself into a shower of gold to enter her room. As the golden rain fell upon her, Danae became pregnant and later gave birth to a son named Perseus. Fearing the prophecy's fulfillment, but unable to kill his daughter and grandchild, Acrisius locked them in a chest and cast them out to sea. After many days adrift, they washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where a fisherman named Dictys found and raised Perseus as his own. Despite this, not all was well in Seriphos. Dictys' brother, King Polydectes, desired Danae for his wife, but her son Perseus always protected her. To remove Perseus, Polydectes devised a cunning plan. He hosted a grand feast, inviting men from across the island, and required each guest to bring a horse as tribute. Being poor, Perseus boasted of his ability to provide a greater gift, the head of Medusa. Seizing this opportunity, Polydectes ordered him to deliver on his boast. Unprepared and filled with despair, Perseus embarked on his seemingly impossible quest, knowing only the terrifying legends of Medusa. Medusa had not always been a monster. She was the daughter of sea gods, Phorcys and Ceto. sisters famed for their beauty. As the only mortal among them, Medusa's beauty was unparalleled, causing men to fall in love with her at first sight. Despite this, she dedicated her life to Athena, goddess of war and wisdom, and took a vow of celibacy to serve as her priestess. However, Poseidon, enchanted by Medusa, followed her into Athena's temple and violated her. Enraged by the sacrilege but unable to punish Poseidon, Athena turned her wrath on Medusa, cursing her. Medusa's hair transformed into a writhing mass of snakes, and her gaze turned men to stone. Her sisters, defending her, were also cursed, becoming the monstrous Gorgons. Exiled to North Africa, the sisters lived in isolation, their hatred for the outside world growing as they killed any who came near. Determined to defeat Medusa, Perseus received aid from Athena and Hermes. Hermes gifted him an unbreakable sword, while Athena provided a polished shield to see Medusa's reflection without meeting her deadly gaze. Perseus then sought the help of the nymphs, guardians of the Hesperides garden, who gave him winged sandals, Hades' invisibility hat, and an enchanted bag for Medusa's head. Using his winged sandals, Perseus flew to North Africa and entered Medusa's cave, where he found her asleep among stone victims. Using the shield to view her reflection, he decapitated Medusa and placed her head in the enchanted bag. To his surprise, Pegasus, a winged horse and Poseidon's child, sprang from Medusa's body. Mounting Pegasus, Perseus began his journey back to Greece. As he flew over the ocean, Perseus spotted a woman chained to a rock. She was Andromeda, princess of Ethiopia, sacrificed to appease the sea monster Cetus. Moved by her beauty, Perseus approached her parents, offering to slay Cetus in exchange for Andromeda's hand in marriage. They agreed, and Perseus flew over Cetus, killing it with his sword. Andromeda's parents honoured their word, and she married Perseus. Together, they mounted Pegasus and flew to Seriphos, where Perseus' mother awaited. Upon their return, Perseus found his mother in hiding from King Polydectes, who had turned violent in his pursuit of her. Enraged, Perseus stormed the palace, and when the king's guards attacked, he used Medusa's head to turn them to stone. Panicking, Polydectes reached for his spear, but Perseus petrified him with Medusa's head. Reunited with his mother, Perseus ensured she would no longer live in fear. Perseus, Andromeda, and Danae then decided to return to Argos, where Perseus' grandfather Acrisius still ruled. Before leaving, Perseus returned his divine gifts. Athena placed Medusa's head on her shield as a symbol of her power and a final punishment for her former priestess. Though the House of Cadmus was the first great heroic family, another lineage of heroes soon emerged. Argos, a kingdom situated between Athens and Sparta, was ruled by King Acrisius. The Oracle of Delphi had foretold a dire prophecy for Acrisius, warning that his grandson would one day kill him. It wasn't long before Zeus, smitten by Acrisius' daughter Danae's beauty, transformed into a shower of gold to enter her chamber. Danae conceived a son, Perseus, from this divine encounter. Terrified of the prophecy, yet unwilling to kill his daughter and grandson, Acrisius locked them in a chest and set it adrift at sea. After many days they washed ashore on Seriphos, where a kind fisherman named Dictys found them. Dictys raised Perseus as his own, and the boy grew to manhood on the island. However, trouble loomed as Dictys' brother, King Polydectes, desired Danae as his wife. Protected by her son Perseus, Danae remained safe, but Polydectes sought to remove her guardian. He hosted a grand feast, requiring each guest to bring a horse as tribute. Lacking wealth, Perseus boasted he could provide a greater gift, the head of Medusa. Polydectes once been beautiful, the daughter of sea gods, Phorcys and Ceto, and the only mortal among her sisters. Her beauty was such that men fell in love with her at first sight. Devoted to Athena, goddess of war and wisdom, Medusa took a vow of celibacy to serve as her priestess. But Poseidon, struck by her beauty, pursued her into Athena's temple and violated her. Unable to punish Poseidon, Athena cursed Medusa, transforming her hair into snakes and her gaze into a weapon that turned men to stone. Her sisters, defending her, were also cursed, becoming the monstrous Gorgons. Exiled to North Africa, they killed any who approached, their bitterness growing with each encounter. Determined to defeat Medusa, Perseus received aid from Athena and Hermes. Hermes gave him an unbreakable sword, while Athena provided a polished shield to see Medusa's reflection. Perseus then sought help from the nymphs, who gifted him winged sandals, Hades' invisibility hat, and an enchanted bag for Medusa's head. Using his winged sandals, Perseus flew to North Africa, where he found Medusa sleeping among her stone victims. Viewing her reflection in the shield, he decapitated her and placed her head in the bag. To his surprise, Pegasus, a winged horse and Poseidon's child, sprang from her body. Mounting Pegasus, Perseus began his return journey. Flying over the ocean, Perseus saw a woman chained to a rock. She was Andromeda, princess of Ethiopia, sacrificed to appease the sea monster, Cetus. Moved by her plight, Perseus approached her parents, offering to kill Cetus in exchange for Andromeda's hand. They agreed, and Perseus slew the beast. The grateful parents honoured their promise, and Perseus married Andromeda. Together they flew to Seriphos, where Perseus's mother awaited. Upon their return, Perseus found his mother hiding from King Polydectes, who had turned violent in his pursuit. Enraged, Perseus stormed the palace. Using Medusa's head, he turned the guards to stone. Polydectes attempted to fight back, but Perseus petrified him. Reunited with his mother, Perseus ensured her safety. The family then returned to Argos, where Acrisius still ruled. Perseus returned his divine gifts, and Athena placed Medusa's head on her shield, a symbol of her power and a final punishment for Medusa. Upon returning to Argos, Perseus was celebrated as a hero for defeating Medusa. The townspeople encouraged him to participate in a local athletics tournament, where he would compete against some of the strongest men in Greece. As the event progressed and Perseus dominated the competition, it came time for him to throw the discus. Spinning with all his might, he underestimated his strength, and the discus soared into the crowd, fatally striking a spectator. To his horror, Perseus discovered that the victim was his grandfather, King Acrisius. The discus had hit him on the head, fulfilling the ancient prophecy that Acrisius would die at his grandson's hands. This tragic event underscored the lesson that no mortal could escape fate. Perseus, having committed the grave crime of killing a family member, a transgression deeply condemned in ancient Greek society, could no longer remain in Argos. Instead, he founded his own kingdom, Mycenae, located north of Argos and west of Athens. Mycenae soon became the most powerful city in Greece, its massive walls constructed with the help of the mighty Cyclops, renowned for their unparalleled craftsmanship. Perseus ruled Mycenae with his wife Andromeda, and they had many children. Their lineage continued to reign for generations. Unbeknownst to them, one of their descendants would become the most famous hero of all. Heracles, the son of Zeus and Alcmene, whose 12 labours would become legendary. Heracles' beginnings were marked by tragedy and sorrow. From his throne on Mount Olympus, Zeus observed the beautiful Alcmena, Perseus' grandchild, and descended to earth to be with her. Alcmena soon became pregnant with Heracles, wife, Hera, watched these events unfold with growing anger. Hera had tolerated Zeus' many illegitimate children for years, but this time she had reached her limit. When Zeus vowed that the next descendant of Perseus would become king, believing it would be Heracles, Hera saw her chance for revenge. As Heracles was about to be born, Hera used her magic to delay his birth and accelerate the birth of another descendant of Perseus, Eurystheus. Born just seconds before Heracles, Eurystheus became the next in line, and Zeus was compelled to make him king. Unable to reclaim the lost kingdom for his son, Zeus exacted his own revenge on Hera. After Heracles' birth, he placed the infant on the sleeping Hera's breast, allowing him to nurse and gain some of her divine power. Startled, Hera awoke and threw the baby off her, her milk spraying across the heavens to form the Milky Way. Zeus, amused, returned Heracles to earth. Furious, Hera vowed to make Heracles' life as difficult as possible. As Heracles grew, he was educated by Greece's finest masters in various arts, including archery and music. However, his short temper and immense strength made him a danger to both friends and foes. This was tragically demonstrated when he killed his music teacher, Linus, with a lyre after a particularly harsh critique. Despite only receiving a minor punishment, this incident foreshadowed future troubles. Upon reaching adulthood, Heracles married Megara, a Theban princess, and they had 3 children. Yet, Hera, still resentful of Zeus's son, schemed to destroy Heracles' happiness. One day, Heracles returned home to find his door broken down and his family missing. As he called out, hideous monsters emerged, and in a fit of rage, he killed them all, not realizing they were illusions created by Hera. When the spell lifted, Heracles was horrified to see that he had slain his own family. Grief-stricken and guilty, Heracles knew he had to atone for his crime. The murder of family was one of the most serious offences in ancient Greece, and without atonement, the Furies would pursue and torment him. Seeking redemption, Heracles exiled himself from Thebes and set out to consult the Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi, speaking for Apollo, was renowned for delivering prophecies and divine guidance. However, on this occasion, Hera's magic influenced some of the oracle's words. When Heracles sought atonement for his crimes, the oracle declared that he must serve King Eurystheus of Mycenae for 10 years. Eurystheus, born mere seconds before Heracles, was a descendant of Perseus. Accepting his fate, Heracles bowed to the oracle and set off on his arduous journey to Mycenae. King Eurystheus, who had long harboured jealousy towards Heracles, awaited his arrival with eager anticipation. Despite being cousins through their shared lineage from Perseus, they were starkly different. Heracles embodied strength and heroism, while Eurystheus was known for his cowardice, often delegating his battles to others. When Heracles presented himself in servitude, Eurystheus, barely able to hide his glee, quickly accepted. He decreed that Heracles must complete 10 labours over 10 years to atone for his sins. However, these tasks had to be accomplished without any assistance or reward. Heracles, hanging his head in shame, inquired about his first labour. Eurystheus tasked Heracles with slaying a ferocious lion that terrorised a village in Nemea, northeast of his kingdom. The lion's golden hide was impervious to weapons, and its claws were sharper than any sword, making it an unstoppable force. Warriors sent against it had all perished, leaving the challenge to Heracles. Realising no ordinary weapon could harm the beast, Heracles spent months training, uprooting trees and lifting boulders to enhance his strength. Finally, ready to confront the lion, he approached its den and found the bodies of fallen warriors with shattered shattered weapons. The lion charged at Heracles, but he swiftly sidestepped, catching its neck in his powerful arms. They wrestled for hours, and when Heracles finally secured a firm grip on the lion's throat, he squeezed until he heard the fatal crack. With the beast dead, Heracles skinned it, using one of its own claws, and donned the pelt as a cloak, with the lion's head as a protective hood. He also fashioned a club from a giant oak tree, stripping its branches and carving it into a weapon. Adorned in the lion's skin and armed with his new club, Heracles returned to Mycenae. Eurystheus, shocked by his cousin's survival, never imagined he would return alive. For his second labour, Heracles was sent to slay the Lernaean Hydra. This fearsome water serpent, residing in Lake Lerna near Argos, had 9 heads, one of which was immortal, and its blood was the deadliest poison known to man. As Heracles journeyed to face the Hydra, Hera schemed to make the task even harder, hiding a giant crab within the lake. Upon arrival, Heracles charged at the Hydra, using his club to decapitate one of its heads. To his dismay, 2 new heads grew in place of the one he had severed. Perplexed, Heracles continued to cut off heads, only to worsen the situation, as each decapitation resulted in more heads sprouting. During this struggle, Hera's giant crab emerged from the water, pinning Heracles down. With both monsters attacking, Heracles feared for his life. Suddenly, an arrow struck the Hydra, fired by his nephew, Iolaus, who had followed him to the lake, determined to help. With the monsters momentarily distracted, Heracles retrieved his club and crushed the crab with a powerful blow. Working together, Heracles and Iolaus developed a strategy. As Heracles sliced off each head, Iolaus cauterized the neck with a flaming torch, preventing new heads from growing. After hours of relentless effort, the Hydra was finally defeated. Heracles then dipped the tips of his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood, ensuring even a minor wound from them would be fatal. Despite this victory, Eurystheus refused to count the labour, arguing that Heracles had received help from Iolaus, necessitating an additional 11th labour. As Heracles and Iolaus departed, Hera, honouring the crab's service, placed its image among the stars, creating the constellation Cancer. For his 3rd labour, Heracles was tasked with capturing the elusive Ceryneian hind and bringing it back alive to Eurystheus. This magnificent creature, resembling a stag, had bronze-like hooves and stunning golden antlers. Heracles set off to Mount Cerynea, where the hind resided, but its incredible speed made it nearly impossible to catch. Heracles pursued the hind tirelessly for an entire year before finally capturing it. Enraged by his cousin's success, Eurystheus quickly assigned Heracles his 4th labour, capturing the Erymanthian boar. For the 4th labour, Eurystheus sent Heracles to Mount Erymanthus to capture a giant boar that had been devastating the region. Confident in his abilities, Heracles embarked on his journey with enthusiasm, deciding to visit his friend, the centaur Pholus, along the way. Unlike most centaurs, who were more beastly than human, Pholus was both friendly and intelligent, and he had been friends with Heracles since their youth. Upon Heracles' arrival, Pholus hosted a dinner party to honour his guest, inviting several local centaurs, including Heracles' old, wise, and immortal archery teacher, Chiron. The feast began joyfully, with Heracles reminiscing with Chiron before deciding to take a walk. During his stroll, he discovered a jar of wine on Pholus' shelf and decided to help himself to a generous portion. Unbeknownst to him, this wine was a communal treasure of all the centaurs, a gift from the god Dionysus 4 generations earlier. The wine's potent their sacred wine. Despite Pholus and Chiron's attempts to calm them, the situation escalated as the entire centaur tribe, drawn by the wine scent, gathered. The enraged centaurs attacked Heracles, but even their combined strength was no match for him. In self-defense, Heracles shot his arrows coated in the Hydra's poisonous blood, killing many centaurs and causing the rest to flee. Tragically, in the chaos, Heracles accidentally shot Chiron, who fell, screaming in agony. Although immortal, Chiron was doomed to suffer eternally from the Hydra's poison. Zeus, witnessing the event, took pity on the old centaur, lifting his spirit to the heavens and creating the constellation Sagittarius. Meanwhile, Pholus, curious about the arrow's lethality, picked one up for closer inspection. The arrow slipped from his grasp and struck his hoof, killing him instantly from the poison. When Heracles returned and discovered he had killed both his friend and mentor, he was overwhelmed with shame and regret. Unbeknownst to Heracles, a centaur named Nessus survived the massacre and fled into the mountains, where he spent over a decade plotting his revenge. Heracles, having completed the actual labour with ease, pursued the Erymanthian boar into deep snow, capturing it in chains and bringing it back to Eurystheus. Terrified at the sight of the massive beast, Eurystheus hid in a large storage jar, refusing to come out until Heracles removed the boar. Amused, Heracles complied, setting the boar free. Eurystheus, embarrassed, quickly sent Heracles off on his fifth labour. For his fifth labour, Heracles was ordered to clean the Augean stables in a single day, without any assistance or tools. Eurystheus believed the task impossible, confident that Heracles would fail. The stables, belonging to King Augeas of Elis, housed 3,000 immortal cattle, and had not been cleaned for 30 years. The filth was so immense that it had piled several metres high, and the stench was unbearable. Upon arriving in Elis, Heracles met with King Augeas, who promised him 1/10 of the immortal herd as a reward if he completed the task by nightfall. As Heracles approached the stables, he was overwhelmed by the foul smell and the daunting sight of the massive structure. Realizing the enormity of the task, he devised a clever plan. Instead of attempting to clean the stables by hand, he redirected the nearby rivers Alpheus and Peneus. Using his bare hands, he dug a canal from the rivers to the stables. The rushing waters flooded the stables, washing away decades of filth in an instant. The water continued into the surrounding fields, fertilizing the farmland with the rich manure, causing great celebration in Elis. The people rejoiced, knowing their farms would thrive for years to come. To commemorate this feat, Heracles initiated the famous Olympic Games, to be held every 4 years in Elis. However, Eurystheus, upon hearing of Heracles' success, refused to acknowledge the labour, claiming it had been accomplished for payment in the form of cattle. Thus, he decreed that an additional labour would be added, bringing the total to 12 labours. For his 6th labour, Heracles faced the daunting task of driving away a flock of man-eating birds from Lake Stymphalus. These formidable creatures, sacred to the war god Ares, possessed iron beaks capable of piercing through even the strongest armour. Resembling herons in size, their excrement was toxic, rendering the surrounding area uninhabitable. Upon his arrival, Heracles discovered a pair of massive bronze rattles placed on a fallen willow tree by Athena. Grateful for the goddess's assistance, he began shaking the rattles, producing a noise so excruciating that it drove the birds into a frenzy. Hundreds of them took to the sky, forming a massive flock. Heracles then took aim with his bow, shooting down Heracles to Crete, an island near the Greek mainland, where King Minos would assign him his next labour. King Minos had received a magnificent white bull from the sea god Poseidon, who expected it to be sacrificed in his honour. However, Minos decided to keep the bull, deeming it too beautiful to kill. In retaliation, Poseidon caused Minos' wife to fall in love with the bull, leading to the birth of the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature kept in a labyrinth beneath the palace. While Heracles was not destined to slay the Minotaur, a task reserved for the hero Theseus, King Minos wanted him to capture the now mad bull that was wreaking havoc across Crete. Heracles accepted the challenge and confronted the rampaging bull. As it charged at him, he grabbed it by the horns, wrestling its head to the ground. After a lengthy struggle, the bull finally submitted, and Heracles mounted its back. Being a child of Poseidon, the bull could walk on water, allowing Heracles to ride it across the sea to Mycenae as proof of his success. Once his task was complete, Heracles, not wanting to kill an animal sacred to Poseidon, released the bull outside the palace. The bull continued to rampage across the Greek mainland until it was eventually captured and killed by Theseus years later. For his 8th labour, Heracles was tasked with bringing Eurystheus the mares of Diomedes, the Thracian king. These horses were notorious for their aggression, further exacerbated by Diomedes feeding them the flesh of unsuspecting visitors. Accompanied by his friend and lover Abderus, the son of Hermes, Heracles travelled to Thrace. Upon arrival, they witnessed the fire-breathing mares chained to the palace wall, thrashing violently. As Heracles entered the palace to confront Diomedes, a foul-smelling and repulsive man, he heard a terrifying scream. Rushing outside, he saw the mares attacking and killing Abderus, who had ventured too close out of curiosity. Overcome with rage, Heracles stormed back into the palace, slaughtering the guards and seizing Diomedes by the hair. He dragged the king outside and threw him to the horses, who began to devour their master. However, Diomedes' flesh was so repulsive that the horses stopped eating him halfway through, forever losing their taste for human flesh. With the mares now docile, Heracles chained them and brought them back to Eurystheus, completing his task. For his 9th labour, Heracles was instructed to retrieve the girdle of Hippolyta, a gold and leather belt that granted victory in battle. The belt belonged to Hippolyta, daughter of Ares and queen of the Amazons, a tribe of warrior women known for their superior combat skills. Heracles set off to the east, bringing a small band of warriors in case of conflict. Upon arriving, he was surprised by the Amazons' hospitality, and Hippolyta herself showed a keen interest in him. Hearing of his renowned labours and overcome by desire, she willingly gave him her girdle. However, Hera, observing from Mount Olympus, could not tolerate the ease with which Heracles was completing his task. Disguising herself as an Amazon, she spread rumours among the women, convincing them that Heracles intended to enslave them. Enraged, the Amazons mounted their horses and attacked the men in their camp. Hearing the commotion, Heracles rushed out to see his companions being slaughtered. Believing that Hippolyta had deceived him, he struck her down before she could explain, her girdle already in his possession. Heracles then fought off the attacking Amazons, managing to save a few of his men before retreating to Mycenae. Eurystheus, frustrated by Heracles' continued success, decided to send him to the farthest place he could think of, the island of Erythea. For his 10th labour, Heracles was sent to Erythea to steal the cattle of Geryon, a 3-headed giant. Travelling along the African coastline, Heracles soon grew irritated by the intense heat of the sun. In a fit of anger, he threatened to shoot the sun with one of his poisoned arrows. Distressed, the sun god Helios appeared in human form, begging Heracles to reconsider. Helios promised to reduce the sun's intensity during Heracles' journey and offered him his golden cup, a vessel shaped like a water lily used by Helios to sail across the ocean at night. Upon reaching Erythea, Heracles quickly spotted the herd of cattle and their giant owner. Not wanting to prolong the task, he shot Geryon with a poisoned arrow, killing him instantly. Heracles then herded the cattle into Helios's cup and sailed back to Mycenae, where he presented them to Eurystheus, completing his labour. For his 11th labour, Heracles was given the daunting task of journeying to the garden of the Hesperides, daughters of the night, to retrieve the golden apples that bestowed immortality upon those who ate them. The exact location of the garden was shrouded in mystery, and to make matters worse, Hera had assigned a 100-headed dragon named Ladon to guard the tree bearing the apples. As Heracles embarked on his quest, his first stop was to seek out the Titan Prometheus, whom he believed might know the garden's whereabouts. Prometheus, the creator of mankind, had been enduring a brutal punishment for centuries, chained to a mountain as retribution for stealing fire from the gods and gifting it to humanity. When Heracles found him, he took pity on Prometheus and shattered his chains, liberating the suffering Titan. In gratitude, Prometheus revealed the garden's location, but cautioned Heracles that no mortal could pluck the golden apples. He advised Heracles to seek the help of the Titan Atlas, who resided near the garden. Heeding Prometheus's counsel, Heracles set out to find Atlas, who was easy to locate due to his colossal stature. Atlas had been condemned by Zeus to hold up the sky for eternity after the Titans were defeated in their war against the Olympians. Heracles proposed a trade. He would temporarily bear the weight of the sky, giving Atlas a respite if Atlas would retrieve the golden apples. Relieved by the offer, Atlas agreed and handed the heavens to Heracles, then set off to collect the apples. Despite his legendary strength, Heracles struggled under the immense burden of the sky. As time wore on, his muscles cramped, his body trembled, and he feared this task might be his undoing. Finally, as the sun began to set, Atlas returned with a basket of golden apples. Grateful but wary, Heracles thanked the Titan and moved to return the sky. Atlas, however, offered to deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself, promising to resume his celestial burden afterward. Unwilling to be deceived, Heracles feigned agreement and asked Atlas to briefly take back the sky so he could adjust his lion skin pelt for comfort. Unsuspecting, Atlas complied, and as soon as he took the heavens upon his shoulders again, Heracles grabbed the apples and departed swiftly. Furious, Atlas cursed Heracles as he left, his roars shaking the ground for miles. Over the centuries, Atlas became a part of the earth, transforming into the mountain range, now known as the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. Heracles' 12th and final labour was to capture Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the gates of the underworld. Descending into the underworld, he approached Hades and Persephone, explaining his mission. Despite knowing that aiding Heracles would anger Hera, who despised him, Hades allowed Heracles to take Cerberus, but under two conditions. Heracles could use no weapons, and Cerberus had to be returned once the task was completed. Accepting these terms, Heracles confronted Cerberus. In a fierce struggle reminiscent of his battles with the Nemean lion and the Cretan bull, Heracles wrestled Cerberus for hours until the beast was exhausted. Dragging Cerberus by its chains, he returned to the mortal realm and presented the creature to King Eurystheus. Terrified, the king once again hid in his jar, now a permanent fixture beside his throne. Peering out, he granted Heracles freedom from his servitude, thus atoning for his past crimes. Overjoyed, Heracles fulfilled his promise and returned Cerberus to the underworld. Heracles then enjoyed the pleasures of a free life, celebrated as a hero wherever he went. He embarked on numerous adventures, including joining Jason and the Argonauts in their quest for the Golden Fleece. Eventually, he married the beautiful Deianira. On their journey to their new home in Tiryns, they encountered a rapid river. On the opposite bank stood a centaur who offered to carry Deianira across. Heracles accepted, not realizing the centaur was Nessus, the last survivor of the massacre of his tribe by Heracles during his fourth labour. Nessus, seeking revenge, saw his opportunity. Upon reaching the other side, he threw Deianira to the ground and attempted to assault her. Seeing this from across the river, Heracles swiftly shot Nessus with a poisoned arrow. As Nessus lay dying, he deceived Deianira, offering her a vial of his blood, claiming it had magical properties to ensure Heracles' fidelity. Unaware of the centaur's true intentions, Deianira collected the blood, setting in motion the tragic events that would eventually lead to Heracles' demise. The couple lived contentedly in Tiryns for some time, raising several children. However, after a few years, Heracles grew restless and yearned for the excitement of his earlier adventures. Seeking new challenges, he departed from his family and ventured to the kingdom of Achaea, ruled by his former archery tutor, King Eurytus. Upon arrival, it did not take long for Heracles to fall in love with Eurytus' daughter, Iole. Winning her affections, he decided to bring Iole back to Tiryns, where his wife Deianira and children resided. Deianira was initially overjoyed to see her husband return, but became deeply troubled when she noticed the presence of another woman. Suspecting Heracles of infidelity, she grew desperate to reclaim his love. Remembering the centaur Nessus' blood she had hidden, believing in its supposed love-enhancing properties, she smeared it onto a robe and gifted it to Heracles, asking him to wear it to dinner that evening. That night, as Heracles donned the robe, he immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. The blood of Nessus began to adhere to his skin, causing an excruciating burning sensation. Heracles screamed in agony and tore at the robe, ripping chunks of his flesh in the process. Nessus had cunningly orchestrated this torment. He had anticipated Heracles would shoot him with a poisoned arrow when he attacked Deianira. By convincing her to collect his blood, tainted with hydra poison, Nessus ensured Heracles would suffer a similarly horrific death. Heracles endured hours of unimaginable pain, during which Deianira, realizing her fatal mistake, took her own life in despair. Knowing death was near, Heracles frantically uprooted trees to construct a funeral pyre. Once it was ready, he lay upon it and asked a friend to light it. As the flames consumed him, a smile of relief spread across Heracles' face, his torment finally ending. At that moment, a massive storm cloud formed over the pyre. Within it sat Zeus, who watched as the mortal part of his son burned away. Zeus then seized Heracles' spirit, carrying him up to Olympus, where he transformed him into an immortal. From that point on, Heracles was venerated as a god by the Greeks. His labours became legendary, and Zeus ultimately cast his son into the stars, where he remains visible as a constellation to this day. While some heroes like Heracles earned their place on Olympus, others became arrogant, leading to their downfall. Such was the fate of Bellerophon, the grandson of Sisyphus, who was cursed to eternally roll a boulder uphill. Gifted the winged horse Pegasus by Poseidon, and learning to ride it with Athena's help, Bellerophon embarked on numerous adventures. a fire-breathing creature with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a snake's tail. As Bellerophon's fame increased, so did his hubris. Believing he deserved to join the gods, he attempted to fly Pegasus to Mount Olympus. Zeus, angered by Bellerophon's audacity and misuse of a divine gift, sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus. The horse bucked, throwing Bellerophon to the earth. Though he survived, he was blinded by a thorn bush upon landing. He spent the rest of his life wandering in misery, a cautionary tale against equating oneself with the gods. Pegasus, meanwhile, reached Olympus and became Zeus's bearer of thunder and lightning. As the adventures of heroes like Cadmus, Perseus, and Heracles concluded, the first age of heroes was drawing to an end. However, inspired by their legends, a new generation of heroes emerged, eager to create their own sagas. One of these great legends was the quest for the Golden Fleece by Jason and the Argonauts, drawing heroes from far and wide to participate in one of mythology's most epic stories. Jason, the rightful heir to Iolcus, had been exiled as a child by his uncle Peleus, who seized the throne. Raised by Chiron, the renowned teacher of Heracles and other heroes, Jason spent 20 years mastering various skills, including athletics, rhetoric, and combat. Upon reaching manhood and exhausting Chiron's teachings, Jason set out to reclaim his kingdom. On his journey back to Iolcus, Jason encountered a treacherous river. An old woman, stranded on his side, needed help crossing. Jason carried her across, but in the process, he lost a sandal to the swift current. Upon arriving at Iolcus, King Pelias, recently warned by an oracle to beware a man with one sandal, saw Jason arrive, fitting the description. Realizing he couldn't simply kill him, Pelias devised a cunning challenge. Pelias promised Jason the throne if he could retrieve the Golden Fleece from Colchis, a legendary artifact of immense value. Confident that Jason would perish, Pelias was shocked when Jason accepted the challenge. Aware of the perilous journey ahead, Jason began assembling the greatest heroes of the era. Heroes from across the land soon gathered in Iolcus, eager to join Jason's quest. First to arrive was Heracles, offering his unmatched strength and skill after completing his 12 labors. He was joined by Zetes and Calais, sons of the north wind, who could fly with their magnificent wings. Next came the Dioscuri, Castor, and Pollux, twin brothers of Helen of Troy, followed by Peleus, father of Achilles, and his elder brother, Telamon, who had aided Heracles in his 9th labour against the Amazons. Together, these heroes formed an unparalleled team, ready to embark on one of mythology's greatest adventures. Next to join the expedition were the heroes of the Caledonian boar hunt, an adventure yet to unfold. Euphemus, Malaga, and Idas eagerly signed up for their next grand endeavour. Lastly, Orpheus, the renowned poet whose melodious singing was famous across the land, joined the crew. His most tragic story, the loss of his wife Eurydice, was yet to occur after his journey with the Argonauts. To transport these illustrious heroes, Jason sought the expertise of the legendary shipbuilder Argus. With the assistance of Athena, Argus crafted the Argo, the swiftest and sturdiest ship of its time. Athena enchanted a piece of wood at the ship's bow, allowing Jason to communicate with the gods. As their voyage commenced, Jason and his companions named themselves the Argonauts, with Argo meaning swift and Nauts meaning sailor in Greek. Their first stop heading north was the island of Lemnos, where they discovered it was inhabited solely by women. Years earlier, these women had been devout followers of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. However, their devotion waned, leaving dispersed them with a foul stench that drove their husbands to sleep with female slaves instead. Feeling betrayed, the women murdered every male on the island, including boys, and lived in isolation until the Argonauts arrived. Upon the Argonauts' arrival, Aphrodite lifted her curse, allowing the women to greet their new visitors. With the stench gone, Aphrodite hoped the women would conceive, ensuring the island's future population and renewed worship of her. Her plan succeeded, and the Argonauts lingered on Lemnos for a year. Eventually, Heracles, frustrated by the delay, rallied his companions and shamed them for neglecting their quest. Embarrassed, the Argonauts returned to their ship and resumed their journey. Travelling eastward, the Argonauts passed Troy and arrived at Chios, where Heracles sought to replace his broken oar. Meanwhile, his servant Hylas wandered into the forest and discovered a beautiful spring. Unbeknownst to him, the spring was home to water nymphs, who, seeing their first human, fell in love and pulled Hylas into the water, making him immortal. Heracles searched tirelessly for Hylas, but to no avail. After days of searching, he returned to find the Argonauts had set sail without him. The Argonauts then passed the kingdom of Thrace and navigated the treacherous clashing rocks, a perilous waterway never before traversed by a ship. Entering the Black Sea, they finally reached Colchis, where the Golden Fleece was guarded by King Aeetes. Welcoming the Argonauts into his palace, Aeetes refused to relinquish the fleece, knowing it was protected by the formidable Colchian dragon. Realizing the difficulty of defeating the dragon, Hera intervened. Long ago, Jason had kindly carried an old woman across a river, not knowing she was Hera in disguise. Grateful, Hera made Medea, King Aeetes' daughter, and a powerful witch, fall in love with Jason. Medea provided Jason with magical herbs to subdue the dragon. Using the herbs, Jason put the beast to sleep and seized the Golden Fleece. With the fleece in hand, Jason and the Argonauts hurried back to their ship, with Medea joining them for their escape. At dawn, King Aeetes discovered the theft of the Golden Fleece and quickly assembled a fleet, led by his son Absyrtus, to pursue the Argonauts. Medea, realizing they could not outrun the fleet, devised a plan. She requested the Argo be halted, luring Absyrtus aboard under the guise of peace talks. Once he was aboard, she killed him, dismembered his body, and scattered the pieces into the sea, forcing her father to halt his pursuit to retrieve them. With time on their side, the Argonauts sought an escape route. They sailed up the Istros River, navigating for weeks until they reached the Alps. There, they carried the Argo overland until they reached the Rhodanus River, where they resumed their voyage, eventually entering the Mediterranean Sea. As they sailed, the Argonauts heard a captivating melody. They were passing the home of the Sirens, creatures whose songs lured sailors to their doom. Orpheus, recognizing the danger, took out his lyre and played his own beautiful music, drowning out the sirens' call. His melody protected the crew, allowing them to pass safely. Once they were clear, Orpheus stopped playing, and the crew cheered and thanked him for saving their lives. Heading back to Greece, the Argonauts made their next stop on the island of Scheria. Home to the Phaeacians, these kind people welcomed the travellers with open arms. After enduring numerous perils, the Argonauts took a well-deserved rest on the island for several weeks. During their stay, Jason and Medea hosted a grand wedding, solidifying their bond. Once married, they set sail again, finally heading home to Greece. However, they decided to take one last respite on the island of Crete, unaware that it was guarded by Talos, a bronze giant who patrolled the shores 3 times daily, destroying any approaching ships. Pelias's single vulnerability, a large bronze nail in his ankle that prevented his divine blood from leaking out. She stopped the giant, claiming to be a powerful witch capable of making him immortal if he followed her instructions. Deceived by her words, and having never interacted with a human before, Talos believed Medea and pulled out the nail. His divine blood gushed out, and he collapsed, ending his menace forever. With Talos defeated, the Argonauts resumed their journey and soon reached the kingdom of Iolcus. After many years, and with the golden fleece in hand, Jason was ready to reclaim his homeland. Upon arrival, Jason discovered that King Pelias had executed his father during his absence, fueling his desire for revenge. Confronting the king with the golden fleece, Jason demanded the kingdom be rightfully returned to him. However, Pelias refused and ordered Jason to leave. Medea, recognizing that the king would never relinquish his throne willingly, devised a cunning plan. She invited the king's daughters to witness her magic, chopping an old ram into pieces and boiling it in a cauldron. Using her spells, the ram was rejuvenated, leaping out of the cauldron with renewed youth. Enamored by the demonstration and eager to restore their aged father, Pelias's daughters believed Medea could do the same for him. That night, they dismembered Pelias and placed him in the cauldron, only for Medea to laugh at their folly the next morning, having never intended to revive him. With Pelias dead, Jason was poised to take the throne. However, Pelias's son, Acastus, discovering Medea's involvement in the gruesome act, banished her and Jason from the city. They travelled south, eventually finding refuge in Corinth. Jason hung the golden fleece in the temple of Zeus, symbolising his abandonment of a life of adventure. He and Medea built a new family, having many children. Yet, over time, Jason grew restless and sought the glory of his youth. He decided to marry Princess Creusa to ascend the social ranks, abandoning Medea and their children. Betrayed and devastated, Medea, who had sacrificed so much for Jason, vowed revenge. She sent a magical robe to Creusa as a wedding gift. Upon donning it, Creusa's flesh began to burn, and she screamed in agony. Her elderly father, attempting to save her, also succumbed to the robe's curse, and both died in front of a horrified Jason. Knowing who was responsible, Jason drew his sword and rushed to confront Medea, but he found her already enacting her final act of vengeance. At her feet lay the lifeless bodies of their sons, Alcimenes and Tisander, blood still dripping from the dagger in her hand. Jason collapsed in grief, weeping uncontrollably as Medea flew away in the chariot of her grandfather, the sun god Helios. Jason spent the remainder of his life in solitude, never finding love again and fathering no more children. Clinging to the memories of his youth, he often visited the abandoned Argo on the shore. As an old man, he lay beneath the ship, only for its rotting stern to collapse and crush him, ending his life with the very vessel that had once brought him glory. Medea fled to Athens, where she seduced King Aegeus and gained refuge. Becoming queen, she bore him a son, Midas, but her power was challenged when the city's rightful heir, the hero Theseus, returned to claim the throne. Years before Medea's arrival, King Aegeus ruled Athens alone, having repeatedly failed to father an heir. Believing himself infertile, Aegeus consulted the oracle of Delphi, who directed him to the kingdom of Troezen, where the princess Aethra would bear his son. Overjoyed, Aegeus travelled to Troezen and met Aethra. Unbeknownst to him, Poseidon also visited Aethra that same night, resulting in the birth of Theseus, who inherited strength and agility from Poseidon. Aegeus, needing to return to Athens, left Aethra to raise Theseus alone. He hid his sword and sandals under a heavy stone, instructing that only when Theseus was strong enough to lift the stone could he come to Athens and claim his birthright. Theseus reached manhood, he lifted the stone, claimed his father's possessions, and set out for Athens. Upon his arrival, Medea, fearing for her son Midas's claim to the throne, schemed against Theseus. Medea informed Theseus that he needed to prove his warrior skills to gain an audience with the king, sending him to battle the bull of Marathon, the mad creature brought by Heracles during his 7th labour. Theseus, using his great strength, easily killed the bull and returned triumphant. Shocked by his success, Medea attempted to poison him, offering a cup of wine. However, as Theseus approached Aegeus, the king recognised his sword and sandals, knocking the cup away and saving his son. Realising Medea's treachery, Aegeus banished her from Athens and embraced Theseus as his heir. Expelled once again, Medea returned to Colchis, reconciling with her father Aeetes. She restored him to his throne, living out her days at the edge of the known world. After living in Athens for some time, Theseus discovered that the city was in grave peril. Years prior, Athens had lost a war against King Minos of Crete, resulting in a treaty that King Aegeus signed to save the city. This treaty demanded that Athens send 7 boys and 7 girls to Crete every 9 years to be fed to the Minotaur, a monstrous creature that was half man, half bull, and resided in a labyrinth beneath Minos' palace. Upon learning of this horrific treaty, Theseus was horrified and immediately volunteered to be one of the next tributes. His plan was to slay the Minotaur and end the torment of his people. Despite Aegeus's desperate pleas for his son to stay, Theseus remained resolute. Seeing no way to dissuade him, Aegeus gave his blessing and asked only that Theseus change his ship's black sails to white if he returned victorious, signalling that he was alive. Thus began Theseus's arduous journey to Crete, where the infamous Minotaur awaited. When Theseus arrived on the island, he was received by King Minos and his family. He quickly caught the eye of Minos' daughter, Ariadne, who fell deeply in love with him. Wishing to protect Theseus, Ariadne approached him before he entered the Minotaur's lair, offering him a ball of thread to trace his path back to the entrance. In return, she asked Theseus to take her with him to Athens. Grateful and hopeful, Theseus agreed. He tied the thread to the entrance of the labyrinth and began his descent into the dark, winding maze. Ariadne had warned him that the true danger was not the Minotaur itself, but the labyrinth's complexity, which had trapped all previous entrants, leading them to starve in its endless twists and turns. After hours of navigating the labyrinth, Theseus reached its centre where the Minotaur awaited. The battle that ensued was fierce and grueling, the hardest Theseus had ever fought. However, his agility and swiftness eventually allowed him to stab the beast in the throat, ending its life. With the Minotaur defeated, Athens would no longer have to sacrifice its children. Theseus then retraced his steps, using Ariadne's thread, and found the other Athenian tributes waiting for him. They cheered his arrival, and together they fled the island on their ship, heading back to Athens. However, during the journey, Theseus, caught up in his victory, began to neglect Ariadne. When they stopped to rest on the island of Dia, Theseus abandoned her as she slept, leaving her stranded. Heartbroken and realising Theseus had used her, Ariadne wept on the shore. It wasn't until she was on the brink of starvation that Dionysus, the god, found her and took her to Olympus as his wife. Meanwhile, as Athens appeared on the horizon, Theseus was so consumed by thoughts of his impending glory that he forgot to change the black sails to white. Seeing the black sails, Aegeus believed his son was dead, and in despair threw himself off a cliff into the waters below, which would henceforth be known as the Aegean Sea in his honour. Upon his return, Theseus mourned his father's death and was soon crowned king of Athens. His reign was celebrated by the people, and he would go on to join Heracles in his battle against the Amazons and aid Oedipus in his time of need, solidifying his status as one of the greatest heroes of his era. Daedalus, a renowned architect and inventor, was revered across Greece and had been tasked by King Minos to construct a labyrinth so intricate that no one could escape it. However, after Theseus escaped with ease using Ariadne's string, Minos was enraged and imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus within their own creation. Despite his genius, Daedalus could not navigate the maze to freedom and turned his inventive mind skyward. He crafted 2 pairs of wings from feathers and wax, warning Icarus that they were delicate and that flying too high would cause them to break. As they flew from the labyrinth, Icarus, overwhelmed with exhilaration, ignored his father's warnings. He soared higher and higher, but the sun's heat melted the wax and his wings disintegrated. Icarus plummeted into the sea, and his tragic end became a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and overconfidence. On the western edge of Greece lay Calydon, destined to host the greatest assembly of heroes since Jason and the Argonauts. King Oeneus and Queen Althea ruled this city, and their son Meleager was actually the offspring of Ares, the god of war, who had secretly seduced the queen. This divine lineage drew the attention of the 3 fates who preside over human destiny. At Meleager's birth, they sang of his fate, pointing to a log in the hearth, declaring, "To you, O newborn child, we grant a gift, to live until this wood turns to ash." Overhearing the prophecy, Queen Althea extinguished the fire and secured the log in a chest to protect her son. Thus, Meleager's life was bound to the preservation of that single piece of wood, hidden away from those who might wish him harm. Nearly 2 decades later, Meleager had earned his place among the Argonauts, joining Jason on the legendary quest for the Golden Fleece. Upon his heroic return to Greece, he sought to visit his family in Calydon, only to find his homeland devastated. King Oeneus, Meleager's father, had been blessed by Dionysus with an abundant harvest. This prosperity led Oeneus to arrogance, causing him to neglect worshipping Artemis, the goddess of nature. Enraged by this oversight, Artemis sent a colossal boar to ravage the land, destroying towns, trampling crops, and killing anyone in its path. With his kingdom in ruins, King Oeneus dispatched messenger birds throughout Greece, summoning the greatest heroes to hunt the beast. Meleager was appointed to lead this formidable expedition, attracting over 50 warriors. His trusted Argonaut companions, recently returned to Greece, were the first to join: Jason, Euphemus, and Midas, alongside Peleus, Telamon, and the Dioscuri. Theseus, the Minotaur-slaying king of Athens, also answered the call, joined by Iolaus, the nephew of Heracles, who had aided in defeating the Lenaean Hydra. Nestor, the wise king of Pylos, and Laertes, father of the famed Odysseus, were among the illustrious assembly. As the hunt began, a unique participant arrived: Atalanta, a woman of extraordinary prowess. Born to a king who desired a son, Atalanta was abandoned as a baby in the wilderness. She was nursed by a bear and later found and raised by hunters. Growing up, she became a skilled huntress and a devoted follower of Artemis. Renowned for her unmatched archery and athletic abilities, Atalanta sought to join the hunt, aiming to prove her worth. Her arrival was met with ridicule from the assembled warriors, who laughed at the idea of a woman hunting the fearsome boar. Only Meleager remained silent, captivated by Atalanta's presence. He argued passionately for her inclusion until the others Atalanta remained composed, drawing her bow and shooting an arrow into the boar's throat. As the creature screamed in pain, Meleager seized the moment, driving his spear into its heart. The hunters erupted in cheers, praising Meleager for the killing blow. However, he refused the glory, insisting that Atalanta, who struck first, deserved the boar's hide. This sparked outrage, especially from Meleager's uncles, Toxeus and Plexippus, who argued that the prize should go to them if Meleager did not want it. Blinded by his love for Atalanta, Meleager drew his sword and killed his uncles on the spot. Shocked by the violence, the hunters returned to Calydon, with news of the deaths soon reaching Queen Althea. Overcome with grief and rage, she retrieved the log that controlled Meleager's life and threw it into the fire. As the log burned, Meleager screamed in agony and died as the log turned to ash. Realizing her actions, Althea tried to save the log, but it was too late. Consumed by guilt, she took her own life. Thus, the Caledonian boar hunt ended in tragedy, scattering the heroes, while Atalanta faced new adventures. Atalanta's fame spread across Greece following her role in the hunt, attracting numerous suitors. However, she wished to continue her adventures and devised a plan to deter them. She declared that she would only marry the man who could outrun her in a foot race. Confident in her unmatched speed, she knew no man could win. One day, a suitor named Hippomenes challenged her. Aware of his slim chances, he prayed to Aphrodite for help. The goddess gifted him 3 golden apples, so alluring that no mortal could resist them. As the race began, Atalanta quickly took the lead. Hippomenes threw an apple before her, causing her to stop and pick it up. He repeated this with the second apple, and with the finish line in sight, he threw the 3rd apple far off the track. Atalanta feared to retrieve it, allowing Hippomenes to win the race and claim her hand in marriage. Atalanta and Hippomenes wed and had a son, with Atalanta falling deeply in love with her husband. However, in his excitement over winning, Hippomenes forgot to thank Aphrodite for her assistance, setting the stage for future challenges. In retaliation, Aphrodite made Atalanta and Hippomenes lay together in a sacred temple of Zeus. The king of the gods, enraged by this desecration, transformed the couple into lions. According to ancient Greek belief, male and female lions could not mate, as lion cubs were thought to result only from the union of lions and leopards. Thus, the couple was doomed to wander the earth, always together, yet forever deprived of the joys of intimacy. With the Caledonian boar hunt concluded, a new generation of heroes began to emerge. However, Zeus believed that too many demigods still roamed the earth, blurring the line between gods and mortals. To rectify this, he orchestrated events that would lead to the greatest war the world had ever seen, a war that would purge his numerous descendants from the earth. Across the sea from the great cities of Greece lay Troy, the most powerful kingdom of all. Its famous walls, said to be indestructible, had been built by the gods themselves. Troy was ruled by King Priam and Queen Hecuba, beloved and respected by their people. During his reign, Priam fathered 50 sons and 50 daughters. The most admired among them was Prince Hector, Troy's greatest warrior. As the eldest son of Priam, Hector was brave and honourable, deeply devoted to his homeland and family. He cherished none more than his wife, Andromache, and his son, Astyanax, for whom he would sacrifice anything. In stark contrast, Hector's sister, Cassandra, suffered a cruel fate. She caught the eye of the god Apollo, who gifted her with prophecy in an attempt to seduce her. When she spurned him, Apollo cursed her, making it so no one would ever believe her predictions. Another pivotal figure was Paris. Hector and Cassandra was raised away from his family. Before Paris's birth, Hecuba received a prophecy that her unborn son would bring ruin to Troy. Unable to kill the child herself, she ordered a shepherd to do the deed. However, the shepherd could not bring himself to harm the infant, and instead raised Paris in secret, setting in motion a chain of events that would change history. Yet, the prophecy alone would not suffice for Troy's downfall. Another child needed to be born. In the city of Sparta, Zeus fell in love with Queen Leda. Disguising himself as a magnificent swan, Zeus lay with her, and Leda soon gave birth to 2 eggs. From these eggs hatched 2 sons, Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri, who would later join the Argonauts, and 2 daughters, Clytemnestra and Helen. Helen grew up to become the most beautiful woman in the world, thus setting the first step in Zeus' grand design. When Helen reached marriageable age, nearly every man sought her hand, including the greatest warriors, wealthiest warlords, and princes of Greece. Odysseus of Ithaca, Agamemnon of Mycenae, and Ajax of Salamis were among her suitors. Fearing the bloodshed that would follow her choice, Helen sought a solution. Odysseus proposed that all suitors swear an oath to protect her chosen husband. This eliminated the threat of violence, and Helen selected Prince Menelaus of Mycenae. They married and became the king and queen of Sparta. The rejected suitors returned home peacefully, unaware that their oath would soon draw them into a monumental war. Meanwhile, on Mount Olympus, a grand wedding took place between Thetis, a goddess of water, and Peleus, a former Argonaut and king of Thea. They invited all gods and heroes to celebrate, except for one, Ares, the goddess of discord and strife, who was known for causing chaos. Offended by her exclusion, Ares attended uninvited, bringing a golden apple inscribed with, "To the most beautiful." She tossed it among the goddesses, knowing their vanity would lead to conflict. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed the apple. Unable to resolve the dispute, the goddesses turned to Zeus, who saw an opportunity to advance his plan. Rather than choose himself, Zeus appointed a mortal to judge. He selected Paris, the exiled prince of Troy, raised as a shepherd. The 3 goddesses approached Paris, each offering a bribe for his favour. Hera promised kingship over Europe and Asia. Athena offered unparalleled skill in war, and Aphrodite, knowing his desires, promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite, who instructed him to travel to Sparta, where she would use her magic to make Queen Helen fall in love with him. Paris travelled to Sparta and met Helen. They fell deeply in love. Defying the Spartan guards sent to prevent her abduction, Paris and Helen escaped, embarking on a voyage back to Troy. This act of love and defiance would set the stage for the legendary Trojan War. As Paris arrived home, his father, King Priam, recognized him instantly and welcomed him with open arms. The entire palace buzzed with excitement, eager to catch a glimpse of Helen, whose beauty had captivated all of Troy. The courtiers and servants alike were thrilled to see the new princess. However, amidst the joyous celebrations, there were 2 individuals whose concerns overshadowed their happiness. Prince Hector was furious with his brother, warning Paris that his impulsive and lustful actions would inevitably bring war to Troy's shores. Hector's stern words contrasted sharply with the reaction of their sister Cassandra. She shrieked in despair, prophesying that Helen's arrival would spell the doom of Troy itself. Cursed by Apollo, Cassandra's dire warnings were dismissed by everyone, the royal guards included, as nothing more than mad ravings. Meanwhile, in Sparta, King Menelaus returned from a funeral in Crete to the devastating news that his wife, Helen, to honour their oaths and join him in the impending conflict. True to their word, they answered his call. Soon, the greatest warriors from across Greece gathered to restore Helen to her rightful place in Sparta. The first to join Menelaus was his brother, Agamemnon. As the most powerful Greek king, Agamemnon ruled over Mycenae, a wealthy ally of Sparta with the largest army. When war loomed, it was Agamemnon who took command of Greece's mighty fleet. Following him were the suitors of Helen, who had sworn their allegiance to Menelaus. Kings like Nestor, Diomedes, and Odysseus, the wisest of the Greeks, kept their promises. Alongside these powerful kings were Greece's finest warriors, including Achilles, Patroclus, Ajax the Greater, and Ajax the Lesser. Achilles, the Prince of Thea, was renowned as the greatest warrior ever. His involvement virtually guaranteed victory in any conflict. Achilles' invulnerability to attacks made him indispensable. Without his support, the conquest of Troy seemed unthinkable. The tale of his invulnerability began at his birth, when his mother, the water goddess Thetis, submerged him in the river Styx, rendering him immortal except for his heel, which she held as she dipped him. Eager for glory, Achilles joined the expedition with his lifelong friend Patroclus at his side. With the greatest fighters of Greece assembled, Agamemnon commanded a formidable fleet of hundreds of ships. However, as they prepared to set sail for Troy, they found themselves stranded. The waters had calmed and the winds had ceased. Agamemnon had offended the goddess Artemis by killing a sacred deer, and she had stolen the winds as punishment. Desperate to reach Troy, Agamemnon consulted a prophet to learn how to appease the goddess. The prophet revealed that to restore the winds, Agamemnon would have to sacrifice his eldest daughter, Iphigenia, the one dearest to him. With thousands of men waiting impatiently, Agamemnon's pride could not bear the delay. Deceptively claiming that Achilles desired to marry her, Agamemnon lured his daughter to the camp. Iphigenia arrived, filled with excitement, only to realize too late that the altar was not for a wedding, but for a sacrifice. Her father's dagger plunged into her heart as she walked towards him, shattering her dreams and sealing her tragic fate. With his daughter now lifeless at his feet, Agamemnon had finally appeased Artemis. The goddess released the winds from her grasp, allowing the Greek fleet to set sail once more. Their journey to Troy was swift, but awaiting them on the shores was the formidable Trojan army, ready for battle. Among the defenders was Aeneas, the son of Aphrodite and a cousin to the royal family, who took up arms to protect his homeland. Troy did not stand alone. King Priam had called upon his allies for support. The Lycians, led by the valiant Sarpedon, son of Zeus and grandson of Bellerophon, and the legendary warrior Glaucus, marched to Troy's aid. Joining them were the fierce Amazons, led by Penthesilea, a daughter of Ares, who could outfight nearly any man. As the best warriors and leaders of their time prepared for combat, so too did the gods take sides in the conflict. Still resentful of Paris for not awarding them the golden apple, Hera and Athena pledged their support to the Greeks. In contrast, Aphrodite, who had gifted Helen to the Trojans, sided with Troy. Apollo, the patron of Troy, defended the city, while Poseidon, jealous of Troy's devotion to Apollo, allied with the Greeks. Finally, Ares, enticed by the chaos of battle and eager to challenge his sister Athena, chose to support the Trojans, hoping to cause as much bloodshed as possible. For 9 long years the Achaeans assaulted Troy, launching wave after wave against its impenetrable walls. With supplies dwindling, Achilles led the Greek armies south in search of resources, gold, and captives. They first seized the island of Lesbos, before landing on the the shores of Asia Minor, pillaging towns and cities as they made their way back to Troy. In the cities of Lyrnessus and Hippoplacia, the Greeks captured many beautiful women as slaves. Among them were Perseus, awarded to Achilles, and Chryseis, given to Agamemnon, two women whose fates would alter the course of the war. Agamemnon fell deeply in love with Chryseis, taking her as his concubine. However, her father, a priest of Apollo, was outraged by his daughter's enslavement. He journeyed to Agamemnon's camp, offering gold and silver in exchange for Chryseis. Agamemnon arrogantly refused, mocking the old man and pointing to Chryseis chained to his bed. Infuriated by the disrespect shown to his priest, Apollo unleashed a plague upon the Greek armies, vowing not to relent until Chryseis was returned. With no other option, Agamemnon agreed to release her, and Odysseus reunited Chryseis with her father. Deprived of his concubine, Agamemnon's desires turned to Perseus, Achilles' prized slave. If he had to lose his prize, so too would his greatest warrior. Agamemnon seized Perseus, declaring her his own, which enraged Achilles. Demanding her return, Achilles was met with ridicule by the king, driving him to draw his sword in fury. But, as he did, the goddess Athena descended from the heavens, restraining his arm and cautioning against such rash action. Heeding the goddess's advice, Achilles sheathed his sword, vowing not to fight for a king who had shown him such disrespect. Retreating to his tent, the Greek armies would now have to face their enemies without their mightiest hero. For a time, the Greeks managed to hold their ground without Achilles, though the mounting losses on both sides began to take their toll. Sensing an opportunity with Achilles out of action, Hector decided this was his moment to turn the tide of the war. He bid a heartfelt farewell to his family, holding his wife and son as they wept, knowing it might be the last time he saw them. Determined to save Troy, he emerged from the city's formidable walls, rallying his troops with fervour. Without Achilles, the Greeks were no match for Hector's might, and he pushed them back to their ships. Yet, even with defeat imminent and his comrades falling around him, Achilles refused to rejoin the fight. Taking a bold step, Patroclus donned Achilles' iconic armour and charged into battle. The sight of who they believed to be Achilles struck fear into the Trojans, causing them to retreat towards the city's walls. Desperate to save his crumbling army, Hector turned to confront Patroclus, determined to make a stand. He charged with his sword drawn, delivering a fatal blow to Patroclus. Shocked at his seemingly effortless victory over Greece's greatest warrior, Hector removed the helmet, only to discover he had slain Patroclus, not Achilles. The Greek soldiers fought fiercely to reclaim Patroclus' body, battling the Trojans back to their camp. When Achilles saw his friend's lifeless form, he was consumed with grief, contemplating suicide in his anguish. His mother, Theseus, came to comfort him, and seeing his despair, she journeyed to Olympus to procure a new set of armour from Hephaestus' forge. She returned and placed the divine armour on Achilles, transforming his sorrow into a burning desire for revenge. The destruction of Hector and Troy became his sole focus. As the real Achilles charged towards him, Hector fled in terror, circling Troy's walls 3 times before exhaustion forced him to stop. Resolute in his final moments, Hector stood his ground, ready to face Achilles with honour. He charged, drawing his sword, but his final swing missed, and he fell to the ground. Accepting his fate, Hector refused to beg for mercy, instead asking Achilles to respect his body so his family could mourn properly. But Achilles, still enraged by Patroclus' death, plunged his spear into Hector's neck, ending his life swiftly. tied Hector's legs to his chariot and dragged his body around the city, parading the corpse for all to see as Hector's family watched in horror from the walls above. The sight was unbearable for Hector's father, King Priam. Under the cover of night, Priam approached Achilles' camp, falling to his knees and begging for his son's body. Moved by the king's plea and reminded of his own grief over Patroclus, Achilles relented, allowing Priam to take Hector's body. As Priam returned to Troy, the entire city gathered to mourn their fallen hero. None grieved more deeply than Hector's wife, Andromache, and his son, Astyanax, who clung to his body as it was carried through the sorrowful streets of Troy. With Hector now gone, all hope within the city of Troy seemed lost. As Achilles closed in, it appeared the end was near. He slaughtered the Trojans mercilessly, making his way to the gates of Troy. But just as he prepared to scale the city walls, he felt a sudden, excruciating pain in his heel. Paris, guided by the god Apollo, had struck Achilles with a poisoned arrow in his only vulnerable spot. As the poison coursed through his veins, Achilles' skin turned white as snow, and he took his final breath. Yet Paris would not live to revel in his victory, for the Greeks, who witnessed the fatal shot, hunted him down and exacted their revenge. With their greatest heroes fallen, both sides plunged into despair. The Greeks, in particular, were disheartened, unable to see a way to breach Troy's formidable walls without Achilles' strength. However, one Greek hero, Odysseus, refused to give up hope. He devised a cunning plan, so ingenious that his tale would echo through the ages. Odysseus had a giant wooden horse constructed, hollowing out its interior to conceal himself and a select group of Greece's finest warriors. At dawn, the Trojans awoke to find the massive horse outside their gates. Seeing the Greek camp dismantled and their ships seemingly sailing away, they erupted in celebration, believing the war to be over. Enchanted by the horse's grandeur, and interpreting it as a peace offering, they decided to bring it into their city. Only Cassandra, ever the prophetess, saw through the ruse. She urged the Trojans to burn the horse, but her warnings were met with scorn and laughter. That night, as Troy slept, Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and Ajax emerged from the horse. They silently dispatched the guards and opened Troy's gates, signalling the return of the Greek fleet with a blazing torch. The Trojans awoke to chaos, their city ablaze, and Greek warriors storming through the streets, slaughtering all in their path. Those who could fled to the palace seeking refuge, but even there, safety was fleeting. The Greeks soon broke through the gates, dragging King Priam from his hiding place and killing him in the temple of Zeus. Troy had fallen, the palace was ransacked, and the surviving women, children, and elders were taken as slaves back to Greece. Among the captives were Andromache, Hector's widow, given to Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, and Priam's daughter, Polyxena, who was sacrificed at Achilles' tomb. Thus, with Troy in ruins, the greatest war the world had ever seen came to an end.
Of all the Greek warriors who embarked on this epic war, the story of Odysseus would become the most legendary. While others returned home within days or weeks, Odysseus would not see Ithaca for another decade. His arduous journey home became the stuff of legend. Angering Poseidon during the sacking of Troy, the god of the sea ensured the Greek fleet faced endless trials. Swept across the Mediterranean by Poseidon's fury, Odysseus encountered obstacles no mortal had ever faced. First, he and his men landed on the island of the Lotus Eaters, where the inhabitants offered them a plant that made those who consumed it forget their past lives. Then they found themselves on the island of the Cyclops, where Polyphemus, Poseidon's son, captured
Odysseus, ensuring he would never reach Ithaca. As their voyage continued, Odysseus and his men sailed to the island of Aeolus, the god of the winds. Aeolus gifted Odysseus a bag containing all the world's winds, allowing him to summon any wind he needed. However, just as Ithaca appeared on the horizon, one of his men, curious about the bag, opened it, releasing the winds and blowing them back out to sea. Their next stop was the island of Circe, a powerful sorceress who transformed Odysseus' men into pigs. Using his wit, Odysseus persuaded Circe to revert his men to their human forms. Infatuated with Odysseus, Circe fell in love with him, and they spent over a year on her island. Eventually, Odysseus convinced her to let him leave, and she instructed him to consult the spirit of the dead prophet Tiresias in the underworld. After offering a sacrifice, Tiresias advised Odysseus on how to return to Ithaca, warning him of the trials ahead. Returning to Circe's island briefly, Odysseus set sail once more, passing the island of the Sirens. These beautiful yet deadly creatures lured sailors to their doom with their enchanting songs. To save his crew, Odysseus had himself tied to the mast of his ship and plugged his men's ears with beeswax so they couldn't hear the sirens' song. Their next challenge was navigating past the great sea monsters Scylla and Charybdis, known for destroying every ship that dared to pass between them. Against all odds, Odysseus successfully steered his vessel through the narrow strait, escaping the monsters' clutches. However, their respite was short-lived. Running out of supplies, they took refuge on the island of Thrinacia. Despite Odysseus's warnings, his men slaughtered the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios. In retaliation, Helios destroyed their ship in a great storm, killing all of Odysseus's men. Stranded in the middle of the ocean, Odysseus eventually washed up on the island of Ogygia, home to the nymph Calypso. She kept him prisoner for 7 years, falling in love with him. Eventually, Odysseus persuaded her to let him go, and he set off on a small raft. He washed up on the island of Scheria, where he was discovered by Nausicaa, the princess of the Phaeacians. She led him to her parents' palace, where Odysseus pleaded for help. The Phaeacians provided him with their fastest ship, finally enabling him to return to Ithaca after a decade-long journey. However, Odysseus's trials were not yet over. During his absence, Ithaca had fallen into chaos. Believing him to be dead, a group of suitors had invaded his palace, vying for the hand of his wife Penelope and plotting to kill his son, Telemachus. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus secretly surveyed his home. Discovering Penelope's steadfast refusal to remarry and Telemachus' determined search for his father. Revealing his identity to Telemachus, the two devised a cunning plan to rid the palace of the suitors. Penelope, weary of their incessant attention, announced she would marry the man who could string Odysseus' bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads, a feat only Odysseus had ever accomplished. Each suitor took his turn, only to fail miserably. Then, Odysseus, still in disguise, stepped forward. With ease, he strung the bow and fired the arrow straight and true. In that moment, he turned the weapon on the suitors. Unmasking himself, Odysseus, alongside Telemachus, slew each suitor one by one, reclaiming his throne and reuniting his family, finally concluding his long, arduous journey. The final task was to reunite with his wife, whose unwavering love had been the beacon guiding him home. Overwhelmed with emotion, Penelope recognized her husband and embraced him, a moment she had faithfully awaited for 20 long years. With a sigh of relief, Odysseus found smile and tears in his eyes, Odysseus simply replied, "Where do I begin?" As Odysseus's tale drew to a close, so too did the Age of Heroes. Zeus' plan to separate the realms of gods and men had succeeded. Mythical beasts no longer roamed the land, and demigods no longer walked among mortals. The stories of these great heroes passed into myth and legend, preserved by poets like Homer, their tales retold through generations. Having attempted to populate the world with humans of gold, silver, and bronze, as well as his own descendants, Zeus now created a final race of men, the race of iron, the current age of humanity. Unlike their predecessors, these iron men would endure all the world's hardships. They would know old age, poverty, starvation, and war, requiring hard work to survive the many dangers they faced. Despite their struggles, with the gods having retreated from the world, these men of iron were now masters of their own destiny, free to shape the land as they saw fit. They would found cities, learn to write, and explore their surroundings. Philosophy, art, and music would express their creativity. They would invent the printing press, discover gravity, harness the power of steam, and create light from the energy that fueled their civilization. One day, these iron men would use their talents to travel to the heavens, where, for a moment, they could gaze upon their